Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Black Magic. We are thrilled to present today's story. What if Dobby found Harry at age 3 and raised an army of free house elves to wage war against Dumbledore? If these stories bring joy to your day, please consider liking and subscribing. Every bit of support helps us continue this passion project. Now, prepare yourself for an amazing tale. Chapter 1, The Boy in the Cupboard. Dobby felt it like a punch to his small chest, a magical distress signal so powerful it broke through the ancient enchantments binding house elves to their servitude. The tiny elf froze mid-polish of the Malfoy's silver, his tennis ball-sized eyes widening in shock. Young wizard in danger, he whispered to himself, ears quivering. Young wizard calling for help. But not just any wizard. The connection felt significant. Important. Like destiny itself was tugging at Dobby's tea towel. Lucius Malfoy was hosting Death Eater sympathizers in the drawing room, celebrating the 3rd anniversary of you-know-who's defeat while simultaneously plotting against Muggleborns. The irony wasn't lost on Dobby, but he had more pressing concerns now. This mysterious magical call was overwhelming his usual fear of punishment. That night, while the Malfoys slept, Dobby did something no proper house elf would dare. He left without permission. Not to run errands. Not to deliver messages. Just, left. With a soft crack, Dobby appeared on Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. The cookie-cutter Muggle houses looked bizarre to his eyes, but the magic led him unfailingly to number 4. Harry Potter, Dobby breathed in astonishment as the connection crystallized in his mind. The boy who lived is calling Dobby. Inside the house, he moved silently through darkened rooms. The walls displayed countless photos of a large, beefy boy but strangely none of Harry Potter. Dobby's ears drooped in confusion until he passed a small cupboard under the stairs and nearly collapsed from the magical signature radiating from within. The door was latched shut from the outside. Dobby snapped his fingers, opening it without a sound. Inside, curled on a thin mattress, lay a tiny boy no older than 3. Bruises marked his arms. His ribs showed through his oversized pajamas. A broken toy soldier, likely salvaged from the trash, was clutched in his small fist. "Harry Potter, sir?" Dobby whispered. Brilliant green eyes blinked open, showing no fear, only a heartbreaking hope. "Are you an angel?" the boy asked, voice raspy from disuse or perhaps crying. Dobby's large eyes filled with tears. "No, Harry Potter, sir. Dobby is a house elf." "Oh." The boy seemed to accept this without question. "I asked for someone to take me away. Did they send you?" Something snapped inside Dobby then, a burning certainty unlike anything he'd ever felt. "Yes, Harry Potter. Dobby has come to take you somewhere safe." He extended his hand. "Would Harry Potter like to leave this place? Forever?" The boy didn't hesitate. His small fingers wrapped around Dobby's. "Yes, please." Dobby glanced around the cupboard, noting the absence of possessions worth taking. "Just to be sure," he asked, "does Harry Potter want to bring anything?" The boy clutched his broken toy soldier tighter and shook his head. "Then we go now. This might feel strange, but hold tight to Dobby." With another crack, they were gone, leaving only an empty cupboard with its door swinging open. Miles away, in Wiltshire, Albus Dumbledore's silver instruments began to whirl and screech in alarm, but he was at an International Confederation of Wizards conference in Geneva. By the time he returned, it would be too late. The boy who lived had vanished. Nestled between the untraceable boundaries of wizarding and Muggle lands existed places the Ministry of Magic had never mapped. Ancient pockets of wild magic, forgotten by humans but remembered by magical creatures. One such place, hidden in the dense forests of Scotland, had been a sanctuary for escaped house elves since the Roman occupation. Dobby called it simply, the Haven. When they appeared on the edge of the forest clearing, Harry promptly threw up. Sorry. Dobby fretted, cleaning the mess with a snap of his fingers. Apparition is hard on young wizards. Harry wiped his mouth and looked around with wide eyes. The clearing contained several small structures that resembled a cross between cottages and hollow trees. Softly glowing fungi lined winding paths, and the air smelled of pine and something sweetly magical. "What is this place?" Harry asked. "This is where free elves come," Dobby explained, leading Harry by the hand. "Not many, just 7 besides Dobby now, but safe place for Harry Potter too." From one of the structures emerged an elderly female elf with silver tufts of hair and a dress made from what appeared to be carefully stitched autumn leaves. She took one look at Harry and gasped. "Dobby! You brings a wizard child here." "The sanctuary, this is Harry Potter," Dobby interrupted, standing straighter. "The boy who lived. He was being kept in a cupboard, Mipsy." "A cupboard? By his muggle relatives?" Mipsy's outrage immediately shifted targets. "A cupboard? Who would put a wizarding child in a cupboard?" She shuffled forward to examine Harry more closely. "And so skinny. Come inside, little one. Mipsy will fix you proper food." Harry, overwhelmed but sensing safety for perhaps the first time in memory, allowed himself to be ushered into the largest structure. Inside, the cottage was simultaneously cozy and otherworldly. The furniture was sized perfectly for elves but magically adjusted as Harry approached, growing to accommodate him. The ceiling seemed composed of living branches that twined and rustled gently despite being indoors. 5 other elves appeared, regarding Harry with mixtures of curiosity, concern, and wariness. Dobby explained the situation in rapid Elvish that Harry couldn't understand, but he caught his name and Dumbledore mentioned several times, often accompanied by angry gestures. "Dumbledore left you with those muggles?" asked an elf wearing what seemed to be a modified pillowcase with colorful patches. "The same Dumbledore who speaks of creature rights at Wizengamot?" "Nipsy," chided Mipsy, setting a bowl of delicious-smelling stew in front of Harry. "The child doesn't know these things." Harry, who had begun wolfing down the food, paused. "Who's Dumbledore?" The elves exchanged glances. Dobby sat beside Harry. "Albus Dumbledore is a powerful wizard. After Harry Potter's parents after they died, he decided where Harry Potter should live. He chose those terrible muggles." "He did?" Harry's brow furrowed. "But they hate me. They said so." A ripple of outrage passed through the gathered elves. "Eat now, Harry Potter," Dobby said gently. "Tomorrow we will explain more. Tonight, you are safe." After the best meal he could remember having, Harry was shown to a small bed that seemed to be made of moss but felt softer than any mattress. As Mipsy tucked him in with a woven blanket that smelled of summer meadows, Harry fought to keep his eyes open. "Dobby," he called sleepily. The elf appeared instantly at his bedside. "Yes, Harry Potter. Will they come take me back?" Dobby's expression hardened with resolve. "No, Harry Potter. Dobby won't let them." As Harry drifted off to sleep, he didn't hear Dobby add quietly, "Dobby will die first." The next morning brought chaos to both the wizarding and muggle worlds. Vernon and Petunia Dursley woke to find their nephew missing and the cupboard door open. Their first reaction was not concern but fury over the boy's freakishness finally manifesting. When police were eventually called, mainly due to a nosy neighbor noticing the commotion, the officers were disturbed by the cupboard living arrangement and the Dursleys' obvious relief at Harry's disappearance. Meanwhile, at Hogwarts, Albus Dumbledore had returned from Geneva to find his office in an uproar. The silver instruments monitoring Harry's location and safety had gone completely haywire, some spinning madly, others lying inert. "Minerva," he called through the Fleur network, his usual twinkling demeanor replaced by genuine alarm. "We must check on Harry Potter immediately." Minutes later, Professors Dumbledore and McGonagall apparat to Privet Drive, transfiguring their robes into Muggle clothing mid-journey. They arrived to find police cars parked outside number 4 and Child Protective Services interviewing a red-faced Vernon Dursley. "What have you done, Albus?" McGonagall whispered, taking in the scene with horror. Dumbledore's face aged 10 years in 10 seconds. I fear, Minerva, that we are witnessing the consequences of my gravest mistake. After discreetly charming the Muggle officials to allow their involvement, Dumbledore and McGonagall learned the basic facts. Harry had vanished overnight, with no signs of forced entry. The Dursleys' treatment of the boy had been abysmal. And most worrying of all, Harry had reportedly told Dudley the previous day that he'd asked the stars to send someone to take him away. Accidental magic, perhaps? McGonagall suggested as they left the house. Self-apparition in response to trauma? Dumbledore shook his head. Not at this age, and not through the blood wards I established. His voice became heavy with concern. Something, or someone, extremely powerful broke those protections. Death Eaters? McGonagall paled. I pray not, Dumbledore replied. But we must prepare for the worst while hoping for better. Within hours, the Order of the Phoenix was secretly reconvened, and the search for Harry Potter began. Back at the Haven, Harry was experiencing the strangest morning of his young life, which, for a boy who had spent his existence being treated as an unwanted burden, was saying something. Harry Potter must learn about his heritage, declared Nipsey, the elf in the patched pillowcase who seemed to be some sort of teacher. Both wizard and elf knowledge, since he lives with us now. Dobby nodded enthusiastically. Harry Potter is special wizard. He defeated the Dark Lord as a baby. Harry nearly choked on his breakfast. I did what? Over the next hours, Harry learned more about his past than the Dursleys had shared in 3 years. His parents hadn't died in a car crash but were murdered by an evil wizard named Voldemort, who had then tried to kill Harry too, and somehow failed, leaving only the lightning scar on Harry's forehead. That's why wizards call you the boy who lived, explained Mipsy. Only person ever to survive the killing curse. Harry touched his scar thoughtfully. Is that why my aunt and uncle called me a freak? Because I'm a wizard? The elves exchanged dark looks. Muggles fear what they don't understand, said an elf named Griffey who wore a tea cozy as a hat. But treating a child that way, no excuse. Dobby, who'd been uncharacteristically quiet during these explanations, finally spoke. Harry Potter, Dobby must ask something important. Do you want to go back to Wizard World? Dobby could find good wizard family to take you. Harry's eyes widened in panic. You're sending me away? No. Dobby grabbed Harry's hands. Never. Unless Harry Potter wants to go. This is first choice Harry Potter ever gets to make for himself. Harry looked around at the strange, wonderful home of the elves, then back at Dobby, the first being who had ever responded to his plea for help. I want to stay with you, he said firmly. The conviction in the child's voice brought tears to Dobby's eyes. Then Harry Potter stays. We becomes your family now. Mipsy cleared her throat. Dumbledore will look for the boy, Dobby. The Haven's magic hides us from wizard detection, but they will never stop searching for Harry Potter. Let them search, Dobby said with uncharacteristic defiance. Dumbledore had his chance to protect Harry Potter. Now it's Dobby's turn. As summer turned to autumn, Harry thrived under the elves' care. The perpetual hunger he'd known at the Dursleys disappeared as Mipsy ensured he ate nourishing foods. His bruises faded, and he grew stronger. Most importantly, the constant fear that had been his companion began to recede, replaced by curiosity and even joy. Harry discovered that house elf magic differed fundamentally from wizard magic. Where wizards channeled magic through wands with specific incantations, elf magic flowed directly from their connection to the earth and their intentions. Wizards think they need fancy words and sticks, explained Nipsey during Harry's first lesson. Elves know magic comes from here. She pointed to her heart, then to her head. And here. Intent matters most. Can I do elf magic? Harry asked eagerly. We shall see, Nipsey replied. No wizard has tried before. But Harry Potter is already breaking rules by living with free elves, so why not break more? To everyone's surprise, Harry showed an aptitude for certain forms of elf magic. He couldn't snap his fingers and make objects appear like the elves, but with concentration, he could influence smaller magics, making plants grow faster, finding lost objects, and especially healing minor injuries. Harry Potter has gift for healing, Mipsy noted with approval after Harry successfully soothed a burn on Griffey's hand. Very rare talent. Dobby watched Harry's progress with fierce pride. In the months since the rescue, the young elf had changed dramatically. He stood taller, spoke more confidently, and had even begun wearing the multicolored socks Harry had helped him make, declaring himself, not just free, but proud to be free. On Halloween, the anniversary of his parents' death, Harry asked Dobby about the other elves in the wizarding world. Most still enslaved, Dobby explained solemnly as they sat beside a small memorial the elves had created for Lily and James Potter. Bound by old magic to serve wizard families forever. Like you were with the Malfoys? Harry asked. Dobby nodded, pulling his knees to his chest. Dobby served Malfoy family for many generations. Very dark wizards, Harry Potter. They hurt Dobby often. Harry's young face hardened with an anger beyond his years. That's wrong. Nobody should be forced to work for mean people who hurt them. Wizard law says elves are property, Dobby sighed. Not beings with rights. Then the law is stupid, Harry declared with childish simplicity. If I could help other elves escape, I would. Something sparked in Dobby's expression, an idea taking root. Perhaps someday Harry Potter can do just that. When he's older and stronger in his magic. Why wait? Harry asked. You helped me when I was in trouble. Can't we help others now? Dobby looked at this remarkable child, barely 4 years old and already thinking of others' freedom, and felt his entire worldview shift. Yes, he whispered. Yes, Harry Potter. Maybe we can. That winter, while Wizarding Britain continued its increasingly desperate search for the boy who lived, Dobby made his first covert trip back into Wizarding society. Using Harry's uncanny ability to temporarily mask magical signatures, a talent they discovered accidentally during hide-and-seek games, Dobby visited Hogwarts kitchens during the Christmas feast. The 100-plus elves working there barely noticed one more among their ranks as they prepared the elaborate meal. Dobby moved through the organized chaos, whispering to select elves he sensed might be receptive. Have you heard? There is a place where elves live free. With no punishments. With clothes if we want them. Most recoiled in programmed horror at such sacrilege. But Flippy, Noddy, and Tilly showed cautious interest. How? Whispered Tilly as she garnished platters of goose. How does elf get free without clothes giving? Dobby leaned closer. Magic older than wizard binding. Magic of intent. If elf truly wants freedom in their heart. He didn't finish, letting the radical idea take root. Before leaving, he added, if you wish to know more, call for Dobby in your heart when alone. I will hear. 2 weeks later, Flippy appeared at the haven's boundaries, shaking with terror and exhilaration at his self-granted freedom. By spring, Noddy and Tilly had joined them too. Harry, now approaching his 5th birthday, welcomed each new elf with open arms and endless questions about Hogwarts and the wizarding world beyond the haven. From them, he learned about Quidditch and chocolate frogs, Diagon Alley and Gringotts Bank. But he also heard disturbing stories of how house elves were treated, from casual neglect to outright abuse. The Hogwarts elves have it better than most, explained Flippy. Headmaster Dumbledore is kind compared to private families. But still no freedom. No choices. Harry, who cherished his newfound ability to make choices, from what to eat to what to learn each day, found this increasingly intolerable. We need to tell other elves they can be free, he insisted to Dobby one evening. Lots of them at once. Dobby, who had been teaching Harry to read using salvaged wizard books, looked up thoughtfully. That would be dangerous, Harry Potter. If wizard families discover elves can free themselves, they'd try to stop it, Harry finished. But we could be sneaky. Like spies. Dobby's ears perked up. Spies? Harry nodded enthusiastically. In the books, spies have secret messages and passwords. We could make something that only elves would understand. Thus was born the Sock Campaign, Harry's first strategic contribution to what would eventually become a revolution. On May 1st, International Workers' Day in the Muggle world, though neither Harry nor the elves knew this coincidence, Dobby and the now 11 free elves of the Haven enacted the plan. They took pairs of mismatched socks, sewn by Harry with symbolic patterns meaningful only to those who had heard Dobby's stories about his freedom, and strategically placed single socks in locations frequented by house elves, laundry rooms, kitchens, garden sheds. The socks weren't close enough to elves to be mistaken as clothes given by masters, but their deliberate mismatched nature and hidden symbols, a tiny broken chain, an open door, carried the message, freedom is possible. Others have achieved it. Within days, 3 more elves appeared at the Haven. Within weeks, the number doubled. As Harry's 5th birthday approached in July, the Haven was bursting with 27 free elves. Their little village had expanded, with new tree cottages growing through elf magic to accommodate the arrivals. A rudimentary system of governance had emerged, with Mipsy, Dobby, and an elf named Gorby forming a council of sorts. Harry, despite his youth, was included in these councils, partly because of his status as the boy who lived, but increasingly because of his unique perspectives and surprising tactical insights. Harry Potter has wizard knowledge but elf heart, Mipsy often said. He sees possibilities others miss. On the morning of Harry's birthday, as the elves prepared a celebration, an unexpected visitor arrived at the Haven's boundary, a house elf so old his skin resembled parchment, leaning on a staff carved from elder wood. I am Gnarltooth, he announced when brought before the council. Last keeper of the old knowledge from before wizard binding. The Haven fell silent as this declaration rippled through the community. Elves were not always servants, Gnarltooth told them, his voice carrying surprising strength. Once we were magical craftsmen, healers, and guardians of earth magic. Then came the Wizard Compact of 932. Harry, sitting cross-legged beside Dobby, listened in fascination as Gnarltooth described how house elves had once been powerful magical beings who entered an agreement with wizards for mutual protection during Goblin Wars. That agreement, originally temporary, had been magically corrupted over generations into the binding servitude known today. But the original magic can be reclaimed, Gnarltooth said, fixing his rheumy eyes on Harry. Especially with help from a wizard who sees elves as equals. Harry straightened. I'll help. Whatever you need. Gnarltooth smiled, revealing surprisingly sharp teeth. I thought you might, Harry Potter. The prophesied one who lives between worlds. Dobby's ears shot up. Prophesied. There is prophecy about Harry Potter and elves. Gnarltooth tapped his staff 3 times on the ground. The air shimmered, and his voice took on an echoing quality as he recited, when the twice-marked child dwells among the forgotten folk, the ancient bonds shall weaken and the old magic wake. Neither fully of one world nor truly of another, he shall lead the silent servants to break their chains forever. Silence fell across the Haven. Harry, overwhelmed, looked to Dobby. What does twice-marked mean? Dobby tentatively touched Harry's scar. Once by Dark Lord. But second mark? Gnarltooth leaned forward, examining Harry closely. The boy bears another mark, invisible to eyes but clear to elf magic. The protection his mother left when she died for him. Mipsy gasped. Love magic. Strongest and rarest kind. So I'm supposed to help free all the elves? Harry asked, his 5-year-old mind both excited and confused by this responsibility. How? That, said Gnarltooth with a mysterious smile, is what I have come to teach you. Harry's magical education took a significant leap forward with Gnarltooth's arrival. The ancient elf possessed knowledge of wandless magic that predated modern wizarding techniques. While some of it was specifically tied to elf physiology, other aspects could be adapted for Harry. Magic flows through intent and connection, Gnarltooth explained during their lessons. Wizards use wands to focus what elves channel naturally. But a human with sufficient understanding can learn to direct magic without wands too. Harry proved an apt pupil. By his 6th birthday, he could wandlessly summon small objects, create light, and perform minor transformations, abilities that would have astonished the wizarding world, where such wandless control was rare even among adult wizards. More importantly, Harry learned to participate in specifically elf-centered magic. By joining hands with Dobby and focusing their combined intent, they could perform workings neither could achieve alone, strengthening the Haven's protective boundaries, communicating across distances, and even beginning to unravel the magical components of House Elf binding. The binding has weaknesses, Gnarltooth explained to the council. It requires elf acceptance to maintain full strength. That is why occasional elves throughout history have freed themselves despite the magic. Like Dobby did. Harry said proudly, causing the elf to blush. Precisely. But if many elves simultaneously reject their servitude while a wizard, especially one with your unique magical signature, Harry, performs a counter-ritual, the binding could be broken on a larger scale. This revelation electrified the growing community. The Haven now hosted over 40 free elves, and their network of quiet revolutionaries extended into dozens of wizarding households and institutions. Meanwhile, the wizarding world remained in turmoil over Harry Potter's continued absence. The Daily Prophet regularly featured updates on the search, with increasingly outlandish theories about his whereabouts. Some claimed he'd been kidnapped by remaining Death Eaters. Others suggested he was being trained in secret by Dumbledore himself. A few fringe voices even proposed he had never survived Voldemort's attack at all, and the boy who lived legend was merely propaganda. Albus Dumbledore, whose reputation had suffered significant damage when the Dursleys' treatment of Harry became public knowledge, continued his own search with increasing desperation. The blood protection from Lily Potter's sacrifice was critically important to his long-term plans for defeating Voldemort, who Dumbledore remained convinced would return. What nobody in the wizarding world suspected was that Harry Potter was thriving, growing strong in both body and magic, and developing a worldview fundamentally different from what anyone had planned for him. The first major test of the growing elf rebellion came shortly after Harry turned 7. A particularly abused elf named Wispy had escaped from the Nott family, bringing disturbing news. Theodore Nott Sr. was experimenting with magic designed to strengthen the house elf binding, having noticed the increasing unreliability of elves throughout Britain. He has ancient book, Wispy reported, still trembling from her ordeal. Says it contains ritual to make elf binding permanent and unbreakable. No freedom ever again. Dobby and the council exchanged alarmed glances. Harry, who now attended all meetings as both student and contributor, spoke up immediately. We have to stop him. And take that book. Wizard Home has protections, Mipsy cautioned. Dangerous for elves to enter uninvited with intent to steal. But not for me, Harry pointed out. I'm a wizard. The wards won't react to me the same way. Dobby's eyes widened in horror. No. Harry Potter cannot risk himself. A heated debate erupted, but Harry remained firm. I won't go alone. You and 3 others can come with me, Dobby. You know the Nott house from visiting with the Malfoys, right? We get in, find the book, and get out. Wizard child of 7 years cannot, began Gorby. I'm not just any wizard child, Harry interrupted, a note of steel entering his young voice. I'm Harry Potter. And I'm also part of this community. I won't let anyone take away your chance for freedom. The determined set of his jaw reminded the older elves forcefully that this child had indeed survived a killing curse. Perhaps more significantly, he'd survived 3 years with the Dursleys without losing his capacity for compassion. Eventually, a compromise was reached. Harry would participate, but under extremely controlled circumstances with multiple escape contingencies. Gnarltooth spent days preparing protective charms for him, weaving elf magic into a bracelet of woven grass that would shield Harry from minor hexes and detection. The raid on Nott Manor occurred during a ministry function that Wispy confirmed would keep the entire family away for hours. Dobby, Harry, and 3 combat-trained elves named Flipsy, Morkin, and Gibby brought directly into the Manor's kitchen, the one area where elf apparition couldn't be fully blocked due to practical necessity. "Remember the plan," Harry whispered, trying to control his nerves. "Find the study, locate the book, and leave without touching anything else." Dobby nodded, taking Harry's hand as they moved silently through the imposing house. Harry had never seen such a grand dwelling, but unlike Dudley, who would have been grabbing at everything, Harry remained focused on their mission. They found the study on the 2nd floor, a dark-paneled room lined with books and magical artifacts that made Harry's scar prickle uncomfortably. "Dark magic here," Dobby whispered. "Very dark." Harry nodded, feeling it too. "Spread out. Look for a really old book about elf binding." The search took tense minutes, with Morkin keeping watch at the door. Finally, Flipsy called softly from a glass-fronted cabinet. "This one has elf symbols. Old binding runes." Harry peered at the ancient tome, recognizing the symbols from Gnarltooth's teachings. "That's it. Can you open the cabinet?" Dobby's fingers hovered near the handle, detecting magical protections. "Blood-locked. Only Nott family can open." Harry's face fell, but only momentarily. "Wait. I've been practicing something with Gnarltooth." He closed his eyes, extending his hand toward the lock. Concentrating on the magic he could feel surrounding it, he visualized it as threads that could be untangled rather than broken. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked, manipulating the magical energies with a precision that belied his age. Finally, with a soft click, the cabinet unlocked. Harry Potter did it. Dobby exclaimed in a hushed but excited voice. "Wizard boy has remarkable talent," murmured Gibby, impressed. Harry, looking slightly pale from the effort, reached for the book, then froze as voices suddenly echoed from downstairs. "They're back early," hissed Morkin from the doorway. "Ministry event must have ended." Panic flashed across the group. Dobby grabbed Harry's arm. "We must go now." "Not without the book," Harry insisted, snatching it from the shelf. The moment his fingers touched the ancient binding, an alarm screeched through the manor. "Intruder ward on book itself." Flipsy cried. Footsteps pounded on the stairs. Harry clutched the book to his chest as Dobby grabbed him, preparing to apparate, only to hit an anti-apparition barrier that had just snapped into place. "This way." Harry ran toward a window, remembering Gnarltooth's lessons about house elf levitation magic. "Dobby, can you float us down?" The door burst open just as they reached the window. Theodore Nott Sr. stood framed in the doorway, wand raised, face contorted with fury. "Thieves," he bellowed, then his eyes widened in shock. "A child? With house elves?" Harry didn't wait for more. "Now, Dobby!" He leaped from the window, trusting completely in his friend. Dobby jumped after him, hands extended, slowing their fall with elf magic. Flipsy, Morkin, and Gibby followed, using their own magic to confuse and delay Nott. They hit the ground running, sprinting for the edge of the property where apparition would be possible again. Spells cracked through the air behind them as Nott pursued, shouting for his own house elves to stop them. "Almost there," Dobby urged as the boundary marker came into view. A cutting hex grazed Harry's shoulder, tearing his shirt and drawing blood. He stumbled but kept running, the book clutched tightly to his chest. 3 more strides and they crossed the boundary. "Hold tight," Dobby commanded, grabbing Harry around the waist. With a resounding crack, they vanished, just as Nott's stunning spell passed through the space where they'd been. Back at the Haven, the council was simultaneously furious about the danger and thrilled with their success. As Mipsy tended the cut on Harry's shoulder, Gnarltooth reverently examined the stolen book. "This is indeed the Codex of Binding," the ancient elf confirmed. One of 3 original copies containing the corrupted spell that enslaved our kind. Can it be used to break the binding instead? Harry asked eagerly. Gnarltootha's wrinkled face split in a rare smile. With modification, yes. And you, Harry Potter, with your unique magic, will be key to that process. That night, as Harry slept, exhausted from the adventure, Dobby sat watching over him with a mixture of pride and concern. Harry Potter was born to be great wizard, he murmured to Mipsy. But I never thought he would become champion of elves. The boy has strong heart, Mipsy replied. But we must be careful. Today was dangerous. Nott saw his face. Did he recognize Harry Potter? Dobby wondered anxiously. Perhaps not. The scar was hidden by his hair, and no wizard expects to find the famous Harry Potter breaking into their home with rebel elves. But both knew their actions had escalated what had previously been a quiet rebellion. The wizarding world would soon have to take notice of the changing tide among house elves, and eventually, of Harry Potter's role in it. The theft of the Codex of Binding became the first whisper of trouble in wizarding society. The Daily Prophet reported it as a simple burglary, noting only that, a rare magical text, had been stolen from the Nott family. But among pureblood families, rumors spread of house elves behaving strangely, disappearing without being given clothes, questioning orders, or showing uncharacteristic independence. Small groups of wizards began to notice the pattern. Lucius Malfoy, whose own house elf had vanished years earlier, raised the issue at a ministry meeting. Something is interfering with the natural order, he insisted to a skeptical audience. House elves are magical creatures bound by ancient compact to serve wizard kind. This disturbance represents a threat to our traditions and security. Most dismissed his concerns as overblown, but a committee was formed to investigate possible magical contamination affecting house elf behavior. Meanwhile, Harry's 8th birthday came and went. With the Codex in their possession, Gnarltooth and a council of the most magically gifted elves began developing a ritual that could potentially break the binding on a massive scale. Harry participated in these sessions, his unique magical signature proving capable of interacting with the binding spells in ways pure elf magic couldn't. The original compact was between wizards and elves, Gnarltooth explained. Therefore, its unraveling requires both kinds of magic working in concert. Harry's education continued to advance rapidly. Besides elf magic, he studied traditional wizarding subjects using books liberated from various sources. His natural aptitude for defense against the dark arts became apparent early, along with a surprising talent for potions under Mipsy's tutelage. Harry Potter has his mother's touch with brewing, she noted approvingly as Harry successfully completed a healing draft far beyond his years. By age 9, Harry had developed a magical repertoire that combined wizarding knowledge with elf techniques in unprecedented ways. He could apparate alongside Dobby, though not yet independently, perform significant wandless magic, and had mastered the elf form of invisibility, not quite as complete as a wizard's disillusionment charm but sufficient to avoid casual detection. The haven had grown into a true settlement, now housing over 100 free elves. A network of safe houses had been established throughout Britain where elves in transition could hide temporarily. The liberation movement had developed a sophisticated underground communication system using enchanted objects that could pass messages without detection. All of this operated completely beneath the notice of the wizarding world, or so they believed, until the incident at Hogwarts. It began innocuously enough. 3 Hogwarts kitchen elves who had been secretly in contact with Dobby's network decided to claim their freedom. Rather than simply disappearing, however, they chose to make a statement. During the start-of-term feast in September of 1989, as students and faculty filled the Great Hall, the 3 elves appeared, not in the kitchen as usual, but directly in front of the high table where the teachers sat. Each wore a single sock prominently displayed like a badge of honor. "We be free elves now," announced the eldest, a female named Mimsy. "We thanks Hogwarts for years of work, but we goes to join our free brothers and sisters." Before the shocked staff could respond, the elves vanished with 3 distinct cracks. Pandemonium erupted among the students while the faculty sat in stunned silence. Dumbledore, whose twinkling eyes had gone sharp with concern, quickly restored order and continued the feast as if nothing unusual had occurred. But afterwards, he called an emergency meeting of staff. "This is unprecedented," squeaked Professor Flitwick. "House elves simply don't declare independence." "Apparently, they do now," McGonagall replied dryly. "The question is why, and why now?" Dumbledore stroked his beard thoughtfully. "This suggests organization. Coordination. House elves developing a collective identity separate from their service." "Is that even possible?" asked Sprout. "I thought their magic was bound to wizarding families." "So we have always believed," Dumbledore murmured. "But magic, like all things, evolves. Perhaps we are witnessing the beginning of a significant shift in magical society." Only Severus Snape remained silent during this discussion, his dark eyes calculating. Later that night, he visited Dumbledore privately. "This elf rebellion, if that's what it is, began around the same time Potter disappeared," he noted. "An interesting coincidence." Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. "You suspect a connection?" "I suspect nothing," Snape replied. "I merely observe patterns. The boy who lived vanishes without trace, defying all magical means of location. Shortly thereafter, house elves begin exhibiting unprecedented independence. Both situations defy established magical principles." "Your point, Severus. Perhaps we have been looking for Potter in all the wrong places. Perhaps we should be asking, who would have both the ability to hide him so completely and the motive to challenge the established order regarding house elves?" Dumbledore fell silent, considering this new angle. "It seems improbable. And yet, improbable solutions are sometimes the only ones remaining when all probable explanations have been eliminated," Snape concluded, sweeping from the office in a billow of black robes. The Hogwarts incident marked a turning point. What had been a quiet revolution suddenly had public visibility. The Daily Prophet ran headlines questioning the reliability of house elf magic. Ministry officials began investigating reports of missing elves from prominent families. And at the Haven, Harry and Dobby realized their time of working in complete secrecy was coming to an end. "We always knew this day would come," Harry said during an emergency council meeting. "Now we need to decide, do we stay hidden, or do we make a public stand?" At nearly 10 years old, Harry had grown into a confident, thoughtful young wizard unlike any other. His lightning scar was still visible beneath his unruly black hair, but his eyes held wisdom beyond his years. Living among elves had given him a unique perspective on magic, power, and justice. Dobby, now officially recognized as the rebellion's leader alongside Harry, straightened his mismatched socks, one red with golden snitches, one green with silver stars. "Dobby thinks time has come to show Wizarding World that elves deserve freedom. That Harry Potter stands with us by choice." Gnarltooth nodded gravely. "The Codex ritual is nearly perfected. Within months, we could potentially break the binding for all elves who wish freedom. But we must give them choice," Harry insisted. "Not every elf wants freedom yet. Some are afraid, some are truly happy serving wizards who treat them well." "Wise beyond your years, Harry Potter," Mipsy said approvingly. "Revolution must come from desire, not force. Just as each elf here chose freedom." After lengthy debate, a bold plan emerged. They would wait until Harry's 11th birthday, July 31, 1991, the day he would officially enter the wizarding world according to tradition. On that day, they would perform the ritual from the modified Codex, breaking the compulsory aspect of the binding while leaving individual elves free to choose their own path. And Harry Potter would reveal himself to the wizarding world not as their lost savior, but as the champion of house elf liberation. As the planned date approached, activity at the Haven reached fever pitch. The settlement now housed nearly 200 free elves, with hundreds more connected through the underground network. The modified ritual required extensive preparation, with magical components gathered from across Britain. Harry, now 10, continued growing both physically and magically. Though still small for his age, a legacy of his early malnutrition at the Dursleys, he possessed a wiry strength and remarkable magical dexterity. His education had progressed far beyond what any ordinary wizard child would receive before Hogwarts, though in decidedly different directions. One spring morning, as Harry practiced a particularly complex bit of wandless transfiguration under Gnarltooth's supervision, Dobby appeared with an unexpected object, a letter addressed in green ink to Mr. H. Potter, the Elm Cottage, the Haven. Unplottable location. Harry stared at the envelope in shock. How did they find me? Hogwarts magic, very old, very powerful, Gnarltooth explained, examining the letter without touching it. Book of Names records magical children at birth. When time comes for schooling, letters find children no matter where they hide. Should I open it? Harry asked Dobby. The elf hesitated. It is Harry Potter's choice. Always his choice. With slightly trembling fingers, Harry broke the wax seal bearing the Hogwarts crest. Inside, the standard acceptance letter awaited, along with a personal note from Albus Dumbledore. Dear Mr. Potter, your presence has been sorely missed these past 8 years. I would very much like to meet with you before term begins to discuss your unique situation and ensure your smooth transition to Hogwarts. If agreeable, please send your response with the owl that delivered this letter. With sincere regards, Albus Dumbledore. Headmaster Harry read the note aloud, then looked up at his friends with uncertainty. What do I do? Our plan wasn't to reveal ourselves until my birthday, but this changes things. Dobby's ears flattened against his head. Dumbledore is powerful wizard. Very powerful. And very clever. But not all-knowing, Gnarltooth pointed out. Or he would have found Harry Potter years ago. This letter shows he knows your location exists but cannot penetrate it. A council was hastily convened. After hours of debate, a new strategy emerged. Harry would respond to the letter, agreeing to meet Dumbledore, but on neutral ground, not at Hogwarts or the Haven, and not alone. Harry's reply was carefully worded. Professor Dumbledore, I will meet you at the Leaky Cauldron on June 15th at noon. I will be accompanied by my guardian. I have many questions about my parents, Voldemort, and why I was left with relatives who locked me in a cupboard for 3 years. Harry Potter. The response was delivered by one of the free elves who could apparate closest to Hogwarts without triggering detection. The owl returned the following day with Dumbledore's agreement to the meeting, along with what appeared to be genuine regret regarding the Dursleys. On the appointed day, Harry prepared carefully for his first encounter with the wizarding world since infancy. He wore simple but well-made clothes crafted by elf hands. His unruly hair was combed to partially cover his scar without appearing to hide it. Most importantly, he wore the protective amulet Gnarltooth had created, designed to shield his mind from magical intrusion and detect any spells cast on his person. Remember everything we practiced, Dobby said, straightening Harry's collar nervously. If Harry Potter feels danger, use emergency port key immediately. Harry nodded, touching the smooth stone in his pocket that would instantly return him to the Haven if activated. I'll be careful, Dobby. But this meeting is important, not just for me, but for all of us. They apparat to a quiet alley near the Leaky Cauldron, using elf magic to avoid the usual tracking that would detect underage wizarding apparition. Dobby had transfigured his appearance slightly to seem less conspicuous, his ears less prominent, his eyes less bulbous, though no wizard would mistake him for anything but a house elf. The pub fell silent as they entered. Harry Potter, recognizable despite the 8-year absence by his distinctive scar, walking confidently beside a house elf dressed in colorful, mismatched clothes. Whispers erupted immediately. It's him. Harry Potter. With a free elf? Where's he been all this time? Harry ignored the commotion, scanning the room until he spotted an elderly wizard with a long silver beard and half-moon spectacles seated in a corner. With Dobby at his side, he approached Albus Dumbledore for the first time in his memory. Professor Dumbledore, Harry said, extending his hand with deliberate politeness. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Dumbledore's blue eyes widened slightly at the composed young boy before him, so different from the lost, malleable child he might have expected. "Harry," he said warmly, shaking the offered hand. "It's wonderful to see you safe and well." His gaze shifted to Dobby. "And with interesting company, I see." "This is Dobby," Harry said proudly. "He rescued me from the Dursleys and has been my guardian and friend ever since." "Indeed?" Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. "Perhaps we should continue this fascinating conversation somewhere more private. I've taken the liberty of reserving a private dining room upstairs." Harry nodded, and they followed the headmaster up a narrow staircase, away from the curious eyes and ears of the pub patrons. Once seated in a comfortable room with refreshments provided, Dumbledore regarded Harry intently. "You've grown into a remarkable young man, Harry. Your parents would be proud." "You knew my parents well?" Harry asked directly. "I did. They were exceptional people, brave, talented, and kind-hearted. Your mother, especially, had a gift for seeing the best in others." Harry absorbed this information hungrily. Despite years of healing, the absence of his parents remained a void in his heart. "Why did you leave me with the Dursleys?" Dumbledore sighed heavily. "A decision I have deeply regretted. Your aunt, as your mother's blood relative, provided protection through ancient magic triggered by your mother's sacrifice. That protection was essential to keep you safe from Voldemort's followers. But not safe from the Dursleys themselves," Harry pointed out evenly. "No," Dumbledore admitted. "I failed to properly assess their character or to check on your welfare adequately. It is my gravest mistake, and one for which I can only ask your forgiveness." Harry hadn't expected such a direct acknowledgement. He glanced at Dobby, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "I believe you mean that," Harry said carefully. "But intentions don't erase consequences." "Wisely put," Dumbledore conceded. "May I ask where you have been living these past 8 years?" "We searched extensively." Harry smiled slightly. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere I've been loved and educated." "By house elves?" Dumbledore inquired, looking at Dobby with new interest. "Extraordinary. I sense this is connected to the unusual behavior we've been observing among house elves recently." Dobby spoke for the first time. "Harry Potter is friend to elves. He sees us as people, not servants." Dumbledore leaned forward, genuinely intrigued. "And you've been teaching him magic?" "House elf magic. Among other things," Harry confirmed. "I've had excellent teachers." To demonstrate, Harry raised his hand and wandlessly levitated his teacup, spinning it gently before setting it down again, magic far beyond what an untrained 11-year-old should be capable of. Dumbledore's eyes widened with genuine surprise. "Remarkable. Few adult wizards achieve such wandless control." "Wizard magic too dependent on wands," Dobby commented. "Limits potential." "An interesting perspective," Dumbledore mused. "You've given me much to think about, Harry. But we should discuss your attendance at Hogwarts. Term begins September 1st, and there is much to prepare." Harry set down his teacup carefully. "Before we discuss that, Professor, I need to know about Voldemort. Is he truly gone?" A shadow crossed Dumbledore's face. "I believe he was severely weakened but not destroyed. There are signs suggesting he may someday attempt to return." "Because of the prophecy?" Harry asked quietly. Dumbledore's surprise was evident. "You know of the prophecy?" "I know there is one. I don't know what it says." The headmaster studied Harry for a long moment. "You are indeed full of surprises, Harry Potter." "Yes, there is a prophecy concerning you and Voldemort. I had planned to share this with you when you were older, but perhaps." He paused, seeming to reassess. "How would you feel about a compromise? Attend Hogwarts as planned, and I will tell you everything I know about Voldemort and the prophecy. Your unique upbringing may actually have prepared you better than I could have hoped." Harry and Dobby exchanged glances, communicating silently after years of close companionship. "I appreciate the offer," Harry said carefully. "But I have commitments to fulfill first. On my birthday, July 31st, something important will happen. After that, I'll give you my decision about Hogwarts." Dumbledore's expression grew concerned. "May I ask what this important event entails?" Harry smiled enigmatically. "A long overdue change in the wizarding world, Professor. One that's been centuries in the making." As they parted ways outside the leaky cauldron, Dumbledore made one final attempt. "Harry, whatever you're planning, please consider the broader consequences. Magic is complex, and changes to ancient systems can have unpredictable effects." Harry looked up at the legendary wizard, green eyes clear and determined. "That's exactly what we're counting on, Professor. Some systems need changing." With that cryptic statement, Harry took Dobby's hand, and they disappeared with a crack before Dumbledore could respond. Back at the Haven, Harry's report on the meeting generated intense discussion. Dumbledore's acknowledgement of his mistake surprised many, as did his apparent willingness to accept Harry's unusual education. "Dumbledore is cunning," warned Gnarltooth. "He adapts quickly to new information. Now he will accelerate his own plans." "Which means we accelerate ours," Harry decided. "The liberation ritual can't wait until my birthday. We need to perform it sooner." Dobby looked concerned. "Ritual not fully tested. Could be dangerous." "More dangerous to wait," Harry argued. "Dumbledore knows something's happening with House Elves. It won't take the Ministry long to start investigating seriously once he shares his suspicions." After considerable debate, the council agreed. The ritual would be performed at the summer solstice, June 21st, just a week away. Messages flew through the underground network, alerting connected elves throughout Britain to prepare for liberation. As dawn broke on the solstice, Harry stood in the center of the Haven's main clearing, surrounded by concentric circles of free elves. The modified Codex lay open on a stone pedestal before him, its ancient pages illuminated by magical light. Harry wore ceremonial robes woven with symbols of both wizarding and elvish magic, and around his neck hung a pendant containing a drop of freely given blood from each of the original Haven elves. "Ready, Harry Potter?" asked Gnarltooth, taking his position at Harry's right side. Harry nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. "Ready." Dobby, standing at Harry's left, squeezed his hand. Whatever happens, Dobby is proud of Harry Potter. Prouder than words can say. Harry smiled at his first and dearest friend. "We're making history today, Dobby. For elves and wizards both." As the sun reached its zenith, the ritual began. Harry raised his hands and began to chant in ancient Elvish, words Gnarltooth had spent months teaching him to pronounce perfectly. The assembled elves joined in, their voices creating harmonics that made the air itself vibrate with magic. The Codex began to glow, its pages turning by themselves as if caught in a spectral wind. Symbols rose from the parchment, hanging in the air like constellations of magical energy. Harry felt power building inside him, not just his own magic, but something deeper and older, responding to the ritual's call. Throughout Britain, House Elves paused in their duties, feeling an inexplicable tug on their magic. In manors and castles, kitchens and gardens, their eyes widened as something shifted in the fundamental nature of their being. At Malfoy Manor, a young elf named Trixie dropped a tea tray as sensation flooded her consciousness, the awareness of choice where only compulsion had existed before. At Hogwarts, the kitchen elves stopped mid-preparation, looking at each other in wonderment as the binding that had defined their existence loosened without breaking entirely. And in the Department of Mysteries, an orb containing a prophecy about Harry Potter glowed briefly brighter, as if responding to distant events. Back at the Haven, the ritual reached its crescendo. The symbols from the Codex began to swirl around Harry, moving faster and faster until they formed a tornado of magical energy. Harry's scar burned painfully, but he continued chanting, his voice growing stronger rather than weaker as the magic intensified. "Now, Harry Potter, called Gnarltooth over the magical maelstrom. The final words. Harry raised his voice, speaking the culminating phrase that would trigger the transformation. By wizard born and elf friend made, I break the chains of service laid. What once was bound by ancient wrong, I now set right where it belongs. Freedom of choice to all I give, to serve or leave, to die or live. A blinding flash erupted from the Codex. Harry felt something tear within the fabric of magic itself, not destroying, but restructuring. The light expanded outward in a wave, passing through everyone present and continuing beyond, spreading across Britain like ripples in a magical pond. When the light faded, Harry swayed on his feet, exhausted but elated. Dobby caught him, supporting him with surprising strength. Did it work? Harry asked breathlessly. Around the clearing, elves were laughing, crying, hugging each other. Some looked terrified, others ecstatic. It worked, Dobby confirmed, his own eyes filled with tears of joy. Dobby can feel it. The compulsion is gone. Elves everywhere can now choose. Not all will choose freedom immediately, Gnarltooth cautioned, looking drained but satisfied. Change takes time. But the first step has been taken. The impossible has been made possible. Harry smiled tiredly. And Dumbledore? As if in answer, multiple cracks sounded at the edge of the clearing. Albus Dumbledore stood there, accompanied by Minerva McGonagall and, surprisingly, Severus Snape. Their expressions ranged from astonishment to calculation as they took in the scene before them. Harry Potter, Dumbledore said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent gathering. I believe you have some explaining to do. Harry straightened, drawing strength from Dobby's supportive presence. Actually, Professor, I think it's the wizarding world that has some explaining to do. About how it's treated house elves for the past 1,000 years. He stepped forward, chin raised in defiance and determination. And I intend to make sure those explanations are heard. Chapter 2, The Underground Revolution. The standoff at the Haven lasted exactly 17 minutes. Dumbledore, despite his obvious shock, remained remarkably composed as he surveyed the unprecedented scene, hundreds of free elves standing proudly beside Harry Potter, the boy who'd vanished 8 years ago only to reappear as the catalyst for magical revolution. Perhaps, Dumbledore finally suggested, we might discuss this situation somewhere less crowded. Harry glanced at Dobby, who gave a slight nod. The council chamber should work. Just the three of us, you, me, and Dobby. McGonagall stepped forward. Albus, you cannot seriously consider, it's all right, Minerva, Dumbledore interrupted gently. I believe Mr. Potter and I have much to discuss, and his guardian has every right to be present. Snape's face remained impassive, but his dark eyes tracked Harry with unsettling intensity. The boy has clearly been radicalized, Headmaster. This situation requires ministry involvement. No, Harry said firmly, his young voice carrying surprising authority. The ministry gets involved when we're ready, not before. What happened today wasn't illegal, just unprecedented. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose slightly. An interesting legal interpretation from one so young. Very well, Harry. Lead the way. The council chamber, a structure grown rather than built, with living wood forming walls and ceiling, felt suddenly small with Dumbledore's tall figure seated at the round table. Harry, still tired from the ritual but running on adrenaline, took his usual seat with Dobby beside him. You've been busy, Harry, Dumbledore began, his blue eyes taking in every detail of the chamber. Far more than I could have imagined. We've been working toward today for years, Harry replied. The Solstice Liberation, we're calling it. House elves across Britain can now choose their path, service or freedom. An extraordinary feat of magic, Dumbledore acknowledged. May I ask how you achieved it? Harry exchanged glances with Dobby. Ancient magic, modified for modern use. The binding was never meant to be permanent in the first place. And the consequences? Have you considered what this means for magical society? For the elves themselves? Every day for the past 8 years, Harry responded with unexpected heat. Have you ever considered what magical slavery meant for the elves? A flash of genuine regret crossed Dumbledore's face. Not adequately, it seems. He turned to Dobby. You've raised him well. James and Lily would be proud, though perhaps a bit surprised by these particular circumstances. Dobby's ears lifted slightly at the compliment. Harry Potter raised himself in many ways. Dobby just provided safe place and loving home. Dumbledore nodded thoughtfully. And now? What are your intentions, Harry? The magical world knows of your return, news travels quickly, especially news of this magnitude. Harry leaned forward. Now we negotiate. Elves want rights, proper payment for those who choose to work, and legal protection against abuse. I want guarantees that there won't be retaliation against elves who choose freedom. Bold demands from one not yet 11, Dumbledore noted, though without condescension. The Wizengamot won't easily accept such changes. They don't have a choice, Harry stated flatly. The binding is broken. That's not reversible. They can adapt or face the consequences of hundreds of angry elves with powerful magic and centuries of mistreatment to avenge. Dumbledore's expression grew serious. Be careful with that path, Harry. Revolution often consumes its own children. We're not looking for violence, Harry clarified. But we're prepared for it if necessary. A heavy silence filled the room as the implications hung in the air. What about Hogwarts? Dumbledore finally asked. Will you attend in September? Harry hadn't expected this pivot. I haven't decided. There's so much happening here. Consider this, Dumbledore said thoughtfully. Your influence would be greater as a student than as an outsider. And there's still the matter of Voldemort to consider. Harry flinched slightly. Despite years of preparation, the mention of the dark wizard who'd killed his parents still triggered a visceral reaction. Voldemort will return, Dumbledore continued. The prophecy binds you both. When he does, you'll need more than house elf magic to face him. Is that a threat? Dobby asked sharply. No, Dumbledore replied. A difficult truth. I respect what you've accomplished here, Harry, it's truly remarkable. But there are larger forces at play than even this revolution. Harry felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. I'll think about Hogwarts. But right now, we need to focus on the immediate aftermath of the liberation. Dumbledore rose. Fair enough. I propose a temporary accord, give me 2 weeks to prepare the Wizengamot for negotiations. In return, I ask that you refrain from any dramatic actions during that time. 1 week, Harry countered. And we need written assurance that no elves will be punished for exercising their new freedom. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled with what might have been approval. You drive a hard bargain, Mr. Potter. Very well. 1 week, and I'll draft the protection order myself. As they walked Dumbledore back to the clearing's edge, the headmaster paused for one final observation. You know, Harry, I came here expecting to find a child in need of guidance. Instead, I found a leader who's already changing our world. Your parents would be astonished, and impressed. After Dumbledore and his colleagues departed, the Haven erupted in celebration tinged with apprehension. The ritual had succeeded beyond their hopes, but the real work, and potential danger, lay ahead. Harry Potter needs rest, Dobby insisted, steering Harry toward his cottage despite the young wizard's protests. Big magic takes big recovery. Harry didn't argue further, his body finally registering the enormous magical drain. As he collapsed onto his bed, he managed one final question, did we do the right thing, Dobby? The elf tucked the blanket around him with gentle hands. Right thing is rarely easy thing, Harry Potter. But yes, today, history changed for better. Rest now. Harry slept for 18 straight hours, his magical core replenishing itself after the unprecedented expenditure. When he finally woke, The haven had transformed into a hub of frenetic activity. Dozens of new elves had arrived seeking sanctuary, many still wearing the pillowcases or towels of their servitude, their eyes wide with the terrifying exhilaration of newfound freedom. Mipsy had established a reception area where new arrivals received proper clothes, temporary housing assignments, and orientation to life as free elves. Gnarltooth oversaw a medical station, treating elves bearing scars or injuries from abusive masters. The reports are coming in from across Britain, Gorby informed Harry as they shared breakfast. About 20% of household elves have left their positions. Another 30% have negotiated new terms but stayed with their families. The rest are waiting to see what happens next. And the wizarding response? Harry asked. Gorby's expression darkened. Mixed. Some families immediately accepted the change and offered proper payment. Others. He trailed off grimly. Violence? Harry asked, his appetite vanishing. Some. The Parkinson family tried to magically restrain their elves. The Knotts attempted a binding ritual of their own. Neither worked, but 3 elves were injured before escaping. Harry's jaw tightened. Document everything. Names, dates, exactly what happened. We'll need evidence for the negotiations. The week passed in a whirlwind of organization and planning. Harry, despite his youth, found himself at the center of a revolutionary movement that grew more sophisticated by the day. Committees formed to handle everything from refugee placement to diplomatic communications with sympathetic wizard families. Most surprising was the arrival of non-elf allies. Andromeda Tonks, a progressive pureblood witch who had married a Muggleborn, arrived with offers of legal assistance. A delegation from the Goblin Nation made a discreet visit, clearly reassessing the magical political landscape in light of the elf liberation. 6 days after the solstice liberation, as Harry reviewed plans for the upcoming negotiations, Dobby burst into the council chamber, his expression urgent. Harry Potter must come quickly. Special visitor. Following Dobby to the reception area, Harry was startled to find a bushy-haired girl approximately his age standing awkwardly amid a group of curious elves. She clutched a book titled Magical Hierarchies and Their Historical Context, and was asking rapid-fire questions about elf magic. Fascinating really, how you've managed to modify the binding spell. The theoretical implications for other magical contracts are enormous. Oh. She stopped abruptly as she noticed Harry. You're Harry Potter. I've read all about you. Well, about how you defeated you-know-who, not about the elf liberation thing, that's not in the books yet, obviously, since it just happened. I'm Hermione Granger. This tumble of words was delivered without apparent need for breathing. Harry blinked, momentarily speechless. How did you find this place? He finally asked. The haven is unplottable. Hermione beamed. That's the fascinating part. I received my Hogwarts letter last week. I'm Muggleborn, you see, so it was quite a shock, and Professor McGonagall came to explain everything to my parents. While she was there, she got an urgent message about the Potter situation and the elf crisis. I was so intrigued I did some research and found references to historical elf sanctuaries in Magical Beings of Britain. She took a breath, then continued. The book mentioned they were typically located near ley line intersections, so I mapped the major ley lines and identified 17 potential locations. This was my 3rd try. The first 2 just had confused farmers wondering why an 11-year-old girl was asking about elves. Harry stared at her in astonishment. You figured out a location magical authorities have been trying to find for years, through library research. Hermione blushed slightly. I'm good with puzzles. And I really wanted to see this place. What you're doing is revolutionary, challenging an entire system of magical subjugation that's existed for centuries. It's like magical civil rights. Harry couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. Well, since you're here, would you like a tour? Hermione's face lit up. I'd love that. Can I ask questions? I have so many questions. By dinner time, Harry had developed both a headache and a grudging admiration for Hermione Granger. Her analytical mind caught implications of the elf liberation that even the council hadn't fully considered, and her outsider perspective proved surprisingly valuable. "You should come to the negotiations," Harry found himself suggesting as they shared a meal. "We need more human allies, especially ones who understand both worlds." Hermione nearly choked on her soup. "Me? At official magical negotiations? But I've only known about magic for a week." "Exactly," Harry pointed out. "You're not burdened by wizarding prejudices. Plus, you've read more magical history books in a week than I have in 8 years." After extracting a promise from Hermione to return for the negotiations, and receiving assurances that her parents, both dentists, were surprisingly supportive of her magical adventures, "As long as I'm home by 9 and don't join any dark cults," Harry found himself reflecting on the unexpected encounter. "Dobby thinks Hermione Granger will be an important friend," the elf commented as they walked back to Harry's cottage. Harry nodded thoughtfully. "She's brilliant, if a bit intense. And we need allies among the younger generation of wizards. Harry Potter should consider this when thinking about Hogwarts," Dobby suggested gently. The reminder of his pending decision about school sent a jolt of anxiety through Harry. The liberation had momentarily overshadowed the question, but Dumbledore would expect an answer soon. "I can't leave now," Harry protested. "Everything's just beginning. Revolution needs many kinds of leaders," Dobby replied wisely. "Some on front lines, some behind scenes, some in halls of education." Harry sighed, knowing Dobby had a point. "Let's get through the negotiations first. Then I'll decide about Hogwarts." The morning of the scheduled negotiations dawned clear and cool. The location, a neutral conference room at Gringotts Bank, had been chosen for its political implications. By meeting on Goblin territory, the elves signaled both independence from wizard authority and alignment with other magical beings. Harry dressed carefully in robes that blended wizarding and elvish styles, designed specifically for this historic meeting. Beside him, Dobby wore what he called his diplomatic attire, a miniature suit with mismatched socks still prominently displayed as symbols of freedom. "Ready?" Harry asked, unable to completely hide his nervousness. Dobby straightened his tie. Dobby was born ready. Well, not really, Dobby was born enslaved. But Dobby is ready now. Their delegation included Gnarltooth, Mipsy, and 3 other senior elves, each representing different aspects of elf society. Hermione would meet them at Gringotts, having convinced her parents that attending historic magical negotiations was an educational opportunity. They apparat directly into a side entrance of the bank, where a goblin representative named Griphook awaited them. "Mr. Potter," the goblin acknowledged with a formal nod. "The wizarding delegation has arrived. They seem unsettled by the arrangements." Harry smiled grimly. "Good. Unsettled means open to change." The conference room featured a massive round table, a deliberate choice to avoid hierarchical seating. As Harry's delegation entered, he took in the wizarding representatives with a quick assessment. Dumbledore sat calmly, appearing unperturbed by the unusual circumstances. Beside him, Cornelius Fudge, the Minister for Magic, fidgeted with his lime-green bowler hat, his expression vacillating between pompous authority and obvious discomfort. Amelia Bones, head of magical law enforcement, maintained a professional neutrality. 3 other Wisengamot members, including, Harry noted with distaste, Lucius Malfoy, completed their delegation. Hermione had already arrived and claimed a seat near where the elf delegation would sit. She gave Harry an encouraging thumbs up. "Mr. Potter," Fudge began as Harry took his seat, "this is most irregular. A child conducting negotiations of state." "I'm not conducting them alone," Harry interrupted smoothly. "I'm part of a delegation representing free elves across Britain. And age doesn't seem to be a concern when it's my safety or decisions about my future at stake, so let's not be selective about when my youth matters." Fudge sputtered, but Dumbledore's eyes twinkled with what might have been approval. Perhaps we should begin with the facts of the situation, Amelia Bones suggested practically. What exactly happened during this solstice liberation, and what are its magical implications? Gnarltooth, as the most knowledgeable about the ritual, explained the magical technicalities. The binding was always conditional, based on an ancient agreement between wizards and elves. What we did was not destroy the magic, but restore its original parameters of mutual consent. Impossible, scoffed Malfoy. House elf servitude has existed in its current form for centuries. No child and handful of rebellious creatures could fundamentally alter such established magic. Yet they did exactly that, Lucius, Dumbledore pointed out mildly. The evidence surrounds us. The negotiations proceeded tensely for hours. The wizard delegation, initially dismissive, gradually shifted to bargaining as the reality of the situation became undeniable. By late afternoon, they had established key principles. Elves who chose to remain in service could do so, but with minimum standards of treatment and compensation. Acts of violence or coercion against elves would be prosecutable under magical law, and a 5-year transition period would allow for adjustment to the new reality. There remains the question of Mr. Potter's role going forward, Fudge declared, eyeing Harry with a mixture of wariness and calculation. As the boy who lived, his actions carry symbolic weight in our society. My actions carry weight because they're right, not because of who my parents were or what happened when I was a baby, Harry responded firmly. But if you're asking about Hogwarts, I'll attend this September, with conditions. Dumbledore leaned forward with interest. What conditions, Harry? First, I'll need unrestricted communication with the Haven. Second, free elves must be welcome at Hogwarts as visitors. Third, the schoolhouse elves must receive the same rights and protections we're negotiating here today. The Board of Governors will need to approve such arrangements, Dumbledore cautioned. Then get their approval, Harry replied simply. Or I'll continue my education elsewhere. The meeting concluded with tentative agreements on most points and arrangements for follow-up sessions to hammer out details. As the wizard delegation prepared to leave, Dumbledore paused beside Harry. You've managed something remarkable, Harry, forcing change while leaving room for reconciliation. It's a difficult balance that many twice or 3 times your age never master. Harry nodded in acknowledgement, then asked the question that had been troubling him. When we met at the Leaky Cauldron, you seemed to already suspect elves were involved in my disappearance. How? Dumbledore smiled slightly. Credit goes to Professor Snape, actually. He observed that house elves were among the few magical beings who could potentially circumvent the tracking charms I had placed. The timing aligned with the first reports of unusual elf behavior. A logical connection, though I never imagined the full scope of what you were building. As Dumbledore turned to leave, he added, I look forward to seeing you at Hogwarts, Harry. I believe the school will benefit from your perspective as much as you'll benefit from its teaching. When the wizards had gone, Hermione bounded over, practically vibrating with excitement. That was amazing. The historical implications alone, this will be in textbooks someday. The liberation of 1991 foot or maybe, the Potterelf Accord. Harry couldn't help laughing at her enthusiasm. Let's see if it actually works before naming chapters in history books. Oh, it'll work, Hermione said confidently. They don't have a choice, really. The magic has already changed. They're just catching up to reality. Her matter-of-fact assessment cut to the heart of the situation so accurately that Harry found himself reconsidering his initial impression. Beneath her bookish exterior, Hermione Granger was remarkably perceptive. Will I see you at Hogwarts? She asked hopefully. Harry nodded. Looks that way. It'll be nice to know someone there besides the house elves. We can study together. I've already read all the course books, of course, but practical application is so much more effective with a partner. I've never had many friends, she added with disarming honesty. Other children find me a bit much. Their loss, Harry said simply, earning a brilliant smile in return. As July passed into August, the haven transformed from a hidden sanctuary into the administrative heart of a social revolution. A formal council of 13 members, 7 elves, Harry, and 5 adult wizard allies, established procedures for dispute resolution, job placement for elves seeking employment, and educational initiatives. The wizarding press, initially hostile or sensationalistic, gradually shifted toward more nuanced coverage as the practical effects of liberation became apparent. Witch Weekly ran a feature on how to establish a fair working relationship with your house elf, while the Daily Prophet published an investigative series on historical elf treatment that proved surprisingly sympathetic. Not all responses were positive, however. A group calling themselves the Preservation of Wizarding Heritage League formed in opposition to the changes, lobbying the ministry to find ways to reinstate the binding. More concerning were the anonymous threats received at the Haven, promising retribution against elf-loving blood traders. Harry, now approaching his 11th birthday, found himself stretched between preparing for Hogwarts and managing his responsibilities to the elf community. Though he'd agreed to attend school, he harbored private doubts about leaving the Haven during such a critical time. Harry Potter must go, Dobby insisted when Harry confessed these concerns. Not just for education, but for building bridges with young wizards. Next generation must see elves differently. What about you? Harry asked. I hate the thought of not seeing you every day. Dobby's eyes welled with tears. Dobby will miss Harry Potter terribly. But Dobby has responsibilities too. Many new elves need guidance. And Dobby will visit Hogwarts often. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a massive owl bearing an official-looking letter. Harry recognized the ministry seal and opened it with apprehension that quickly turned to outrage. They're trying to assign me a wizard guardian, he exclaimed. Listen to this. Given the unprecedented nature of your living situation and the impropriety of magical creatures serving as legal guardians for an underage wizard, the ministry has appointed Madame Dolores Umbridge as your temporary magical guardian pending full review. Dobby's ears flattened against his head. Who is this Umbridge? I don't know, but it can't be good if Malfoy's ministry friends are behind it, Harry fumed. We need legal advice immediately. Andromeda Tonks, summoned for an emergency consultation, confirmed their fears. Umbridge is senior undersecretary to the minister and notoriously anti-half-breed, as she calls any non-human magical beings. This is clearly an attempt to establish control over Harry. Can they do this? Harry demanded. Just assign me a guardian without my consent. Andromeda frowned. Normally, no. But they're exploiting a loophole in magical guardian law that specifies guardianship must be held by a qualified magical person. They're arguing that person explicitly means human wizard or witch. That's speciesist nonsense, Hermione declared, having joined the meeting at Harry's request. Person should include any sentient magical being capable of rational thought and moral agency. Andromeda smiled approvingly at Hermione. A compelling philosophical argument, but unfortunately, wizarding law has centuries of prejudiced precedent to overcome. So what do we do? Harry asked. We counter-petition immediately, Andromeda decided. I suggest multiple approaches, challenge the definition of person in the law, propose alternate guardian candidates like myself or the Grangers as Hermione's parents, and most importantly, request that the boy who lived be allowed to address the Wizengamot directly regarding his preferences. They'll never allow that last one, Harry said skeptically. Andromeda's smile turned shrewd. They might if we leak the request to the press first. Public sympathy is currently on your side, Harry. The ministry won't want to appear to be silencing the hero who survived Voldemort, especially after the Dursley scandal. The resulting legal battle consumed the remaining weeks before Harry's Hogwarts departure. The Daily Prophet covered each development extensively, with public opinion largely favoring Harry's right to choose his own guardians. The matter remained unresolved when September 1st arrived, though Andromeda had secured a temporary injunction preventing Umbridge from exercising any guardianship powers until after a full Wizengamot hearing. On the morning Harry was to leave for Hogwarts, the Haven held a small ceremony to mark the occasion. Each council member presented him with a token. Mipsy gave him a pouch of healing herbs, Gorby provided a communication mirror linked to the Haven, Gnarltooth offered an ancient amulet said to clarify thoughts and detect deception. Dobby's gift came last, a hand-knitted scarf in a blend of all 4 Hogwarts house colors. So Harry Potter remembers he belongs to more than one world, Dobby explained, his voice thick with emotion. Harry knelt to embrace his guardian, friend, and co-revolutionary. "I'll make you proud," he whispered. "Harry Potter already has," Dobby replied, wiping away tears. 1,000 times over. Rather than take the Hogwarts Express, which would have created security concerns given Harry's high-profile status, Dobby brought him directly to Hogsmeade, where Professor McGonagall waited to escort him to the castle. "Mr. Potter," she greeted him with formal correctness that didn't quite hide her curiosity. "Welcome to Hogwarts at last." Harry looked up at the majestic castle silhouetted against the evening sky, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. This should have been simply an exciting milestone in a normal wizarding childhood. Instead, it represented a strategic move in a social revolution, a political statement, and a deeply personal journey into his parents' world. "Thank you, Professor," he replied, squaring his shoulders. "I'm looking forward to learning here." As McGonagall led him toward the castle, Harry mentally reviewed the plans he'd established with the council. His public goals at Hogwarts were straightforward: excel academically, build alliances with sympathetic students and faculty, and monitor the treatment of Hogwarts elves. His private mission was more complex: search the castle for information about Voldemort and the prophecy Dumbledore had mentioned, discreetly investigate the backgrounds of children from families known to have supported Voldemort, and establish a secure network of communication between Hogwarts and the Haven. Lost in these thoughts, Harry almost missed McGonagall's explanation of the sorting ceremony awaiting him. Tradition that dates back to the founders themselves. The sorting hat will determine which house best suits your character and abilities. Harry refocused quickly. "Professor, can I ask a question about the sorting?" "Certainly, Mr. Potter." "Does the hat take the student's preference into account? Or is it solely the hat's decision?" McGonagall looked surprised by the question. "The hat considers many factors, including, I believe, the student's own inclinations." "Why do you ask?" Harry chose his words carefully. "I'm coming to Hogwarts with unusual preparation. I want to make sure I'm placed where I can best contribute to school unity, not division." Something in McGonagall's expression softened slightly. "A remarkably mature perspective, Mr. Potter. The hat will consider your intentions along with your qualities, I'm sure." They reached a small chamber where McGonagall instructed him to wait. "The other first years will arrive shortly by boat. You'll join them for the sorting ceremony." Left alone, Harry took a moment to center himself as Gnarltooth had taught him. The past months had been a whirlwind of activity and pressure beyond what any child should face. Yet he felt oddly prepared, not because he was exceptionally brave or wise, but because he'd been raised with unwavering love and purpose. The door opened to admit the crowd of first-year students, their faces showing varying degrees of nervousness and excitement. Harry quickly spotted Hermione, who beamed and hurried over to him. "There you are. I looked for you on the train. Isn't this amazing? The enchanted ceiling in the Great Hall is supposed to reflect the sky outside. I read about it in Hogwarts, a History, and the floating candles are sustained by a variant of the perpetual flame charm developed in the 15th century." Harry smiled at her enthusiasm. "It's pretty impressive," he agreed, scanning the other students. Most were staring at him with undisguised curiosity or awe, whispering behind their hands. A pale, blond boy detached himself from a group of confident-looking students and approached Harry directly. "So it's true then, Harry Potter has come to Hogwarts." "I'm Malfoy, Draco Malfoy." Harry recognized the name instantly, Lucius Malfoy's son, and Dobby's former master's family. He kept his expression neutral. "Nice to meet you." Draco glanced dismissively at Hermione. You'll soon find that some wizarding families are better than others, Potter. I can help you there. He extended his hand, clearly expecting Harry to take it. Harry looked at the offered hand, thinking rapidly. His instinct was to reject the overture outright. This was the son of a man who had abused Dobby for years. But strategic thinking prevailed. I appreciate the offer, Harry said, shaking Draco's hand briefly but firmly. Though I tend to judge people individually rather than by family name. Before Draco could respond, McGonagall returned to lead them into the Great Hall. As they walked between the long house tables under the scrutiny of hundreds of students, Harry felt the weight of expectations pressing down on him. The boy who lived. The elf liberator. The prophesied opponent of Voldemort. So many identities for one skinny 11-year-old to bear. The Sorting Hat's song spoke of the four houses and their virtues, but Harry found himself distracted, studying the head table where the faculty sat. Dumbledore watched the proceedings with benign interest, while Snape's dark gaze seemed fixed specifically on Harry, his expression unreadable. When McGonagall called Granger, Hermione, Harry gave his new friend an encouraging nod. After nearly a minute of deliberation, the hat declared Gryffindor. Hermione practically bounced to the red and gold table. Draco Malfoy was sorted into Slytherin almost before the hat touched his head. Finally, McGonagall called, Potter, Harry. A hush fell over the great hall as Harry stepped forward. Whispers erupted immediately, that's him. The boy who lived. Did you hear about the elf thing? My dad says he's dangerous. Harry sat on the stool, and the ancient hat dropped over his eyes, mercifully blocking his view of the staring crowd. Difficult. Very difficult, a small voice said in his ear. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes, and a thirst to prove yourself. But where to put you? I need to build bridges, Harry thought firmly. Between houses, between humans and elves, between different viewpoints. I can't be isolated in one faction. Build bridges, the hat seemed amused. Ambitious goal for one so young, though you've certainly proven your capability. Slytherin could help you achieve greatness, you know. Would Slytherin accept what I stand for? Harry questioned silently. Perhaps not today, the hat acknowledged, but houses can evolve, given the right catalyst. Still, if not Slytherin, then better be Gryffindor. The last word was shouted to the hall. The Gryffindor table erupted in wild cheers. Harry removed the hat and walked to join his new house, where Hermione had saved him a seat. As he sat down, he caught Dumbledore's eye. The headmaster raised his goblet slightly in what seemed like a private toast. You were under the hat ages, Hermione whispered. What happened? We had a disagreement about house assignments, Harry replied quietly. It wanted Slytherin. Hermione's eyes widened. Really? That would have been, politically complicated. Harry smiled at her diplomatic phrasing. Exactly why we disagreed. After the feast, as Percy Weasley led the Gryffindor first years toward their tower, Harry noticed a house elf discreetly watching from an alcove. Their eyes met briefly, and the elf gave a nearly imperceptible nod before vanishing. The message was clear, Harry wasn't alone at Hogwarts. The network was already in place. His first night in Gryffindor Tower, Harry lay awake listening to his dormmates breathing. Ron Weasley, Neville Longbottom, Dean Thomas, and Seamus Finnegan, ordinary wizarding children with ordinary childhoods. Would they ever understand what Harry had experienced? What he represented? More importantly, could they become allies in the greater struggle that lay ahead? As he drifted toward sleep, Harry's thoughts turned to Dobby and the Haven. Something told him that getting through his Hogwarts years while balancing his commitments to the elf liberation movement would require all the courage, cunning, and conviction he could muster. The first few weeks of term proved Harry right. Balancing classes, homework, and his covert activities taxed even his considerable organizational skills. Each night, He used the communication mirror to update the Haven's Council on developments at Hogwarts, and each morning he met with Nipke, one of the liberated Hogwarts elves who now served as liaison to the castle's elf community. Most Hogwarts elves still prefer to work here, Nipke reported during their third meeting. But they've begun negotiating with Headmaster for better conditions. No punishments, proper rest periods, and annual leave. That's progress, Harry agreed. And Dumbledore's response? Surprisingly favorable, Nipke admitted. He seems genuinely committed to reform, though some other professors, especially Potions Master, are resistant. Classes themselves presented different challenges. Harry's unusual education meant he was advanced in some areas, particularly defense against the dark arts and charms, but behind in subjects like astronomy and history of magic that hadn't been priorities at the Haven. Potions proved especially problematic. During their very first lesson, Professor Snape singled Harry out with barely disguised hostility. "Ah, yes," he said softly, taking attendance. "Harry Potter. Our new celebrity." The Slytherins sniggered as Snape proceeded to pepper Harry with advanced potions questions clearly meant to embarrass him. To the professor's evident surprise, Harry answered several correctly, thanks to Mipsy's thorough instruction in healing potions. "It seems fame isn't your only attribute," Snape observed with a curl of his lip. "Though I notice you missed the question about Asphodel. Perhaps your unconventional education had gaps." The subtle dig at his elf upbringing wasn't lost on Harry, but he kept his temper carefully controlled. Antagonizing Snape would serve no strategic purpose. Herbology, conversely, became an unexpected pleasure. Professor Sprout's genuine passion for plants reminded Harry of the elves' reverence for growing things, and his experience with elf plant magic gave him insights that fascinated the professor. "You have a remarkable touch with magical flora, Mr. Potter," she commented after he successfully repotted a particularly temperamental screech snap. "Rather unusual for a first year." Harry smiled. "I had good teachers who understood plants as living beings with their own magic, not just ingredients or tools." "A wise perspective," Sprout agreed thoughtfully. "One might even call it elvish." The knowing look she gave him suggested Professor Sprout might become a valuable faculty ally. Meanwhile, Harry worked steadily to build connections among his peers. His strategy was deliberate: establish strong relationships in Gryffindor first, then gradually extend outward to other houses. Hermione became his closest friend and study partner, her encyclopedic knowledge complementing his practical experience. Ron Weasley initially seemed torn between awe of Harry's fame and wariness of his revolutionary reputation, but their shared enjoyment of wizard chess gradually built a comfortable camaraderie. Neville Longbottom, painfully shy and struggling academically, responded to Harry's matter-of-fact kindness with loyal friendship. By October, Harry had established what Hermione jokingly called his inner circle, a core group of first-years who supported his elf liberation stance to varying degrees. Besides Hermione, Ron, and Neville, the group included Dean Thomas, whose Muggle-born perspective made him naturally skeptical of wizarding traditions, and surprisingly, Susan Bones from Hufflepuff, whose aunt's position on the Wizengamot gave her unique political insights. The first major test of these alliances came during Halloween week, when the Daily Prophet published a feature titled, "The Boy Who Revolutionized Harry Potter's Radical Agenda." The article, clearly influenced by conservative pure-blood sources, painted Harry as a naive child manipulated by creatures with an anti-wizard agenda. The Great Hall buzzed with discussion as students read the piece at breakfast. Harry, having anticipated such attacks, maintained a deliberately calm demeanor even as he felt dozens of stares directed his way. "Vicious rubbish," Hermione declared, slapping down the newspaper. As if elves needed to manipulate anyone into seeing their enslavement was wrong. Ron looked uncomfortable. "My mum always said house elves need wizards to survive. That their magic is tied to service." Rather than dismissing Ron's concern, Harry engaged it directly. "That's what most wizards were taught, but it's not actually true. Elf magic existed long before the binding. In fact, Free elves often have stronger magic because they're using it according to their own will and nature. Like the difference between casting a spell because you want to versus being under the Imperious curse to do it? Neville suggested thoughtfully. Harry nodded, impressed by the analogy. Exactly like that. The conversation might have continued productively had Draco Malfoy not chosen that moment to approach the Gryffindor table, flanked by Crabbe and Goyle. "Enjoying your press coverage, Potter," he drawled. "Father says it's only the beginning. Once people understand you're trying to dismantle magical traditions that have existed for centuries, you'll find your popularity fading quickly." Harry met Draco's gaze steadily. "Traditions like treating sentient beings as property? Some traditions deserve dismantling, Malfoy." "Careful, Potter," Draco warned, lowering his voice. "Not everyone at Hogwarts shares Dumbledore's tolerant view of your crusade. Some of us come from families with a proper appreciation for the natural order." "You mean families who benefited from elf enslavement?" Hermione interjected sharply. Draco's pale face flushed. "No one asked for your opinion, Granger. Blood traders and mudbloods, perfect company for the boy who lived to liberate elves." The slur hung in the air like a curse. Ron lunged to his feet, wand drawn, but Harry caught his arm. "Not worth it," Harry said firmly, though his own anger simmered beneath the surface. "He's baiting us, trying to provoke exactly that reaction." "Smart, Potter," Draco smirked. "But how long can you keep your temper? You're outnumbered here. Most wizarding families stand with tradition, not revolution." As Draco sauntered away, Hermione asked quietly, "Why didn't you defend yourself more strongly?" "Because this isn't about me defending myself to Malfoy," Harry explained. "It's about showing everyone watching that we're reasonable and they're not. Every time they resort to slurs and threats, they lose ground with the undecided." Ron stared at Harry with newfound respect. "That's, actually brilliant strategy." "I've had practice," Harry replied with a slight smile. "Revolution isn't just about being right, it's about convincing others you're right." The Malfoy confrontation proved to be merely the opening salvo in an escalating campaign against Harry and the elf liberation movement. Over the next weeks, Harry received multiple howlers from outraged traditional families, was the subject of increasingly hostile opinion pieces in wizarding publications, and even found graffiti on his trunk reading, "Elf Lover Go Home." Through it all, he maintained a deliberate public persona of calm determination, even as he privately worried about reports from the Haven indicating similar escalations outside Hogwarts. Several free elves had been attacked while seeking employment in Diagon Alley. Anonymous threats had been sent to wizard families who'd negotiated fair contracts with their elves. Most concerning, the Wisengamot hearing on Harry's guardianship had been repeatedly delayed through procedural maneuvers. "They're trying to wear us down," Harry told Dobby during one of their nightly mirror conversations. "Make it seem like the initial excitement of liberation is fading and things are returning to normal." Dobby nodded gravely from the mirror's surface. "Some wizard families attempting to create new binding contracts with legal language instead of magic. Offering elves protection in exchange for service. Are elves accepting these contracts?" "Some yes, some no," Dobby sighed. "Freedom means choice, even choices Dobby thinks unwise. But more concerning is disappearance of 3 free elves last week. No trace found." Harry's stomach tightened with worry. "We need to accelerate our plans for the public campaign. The longer we wait, the more ground we lose." They had been developing a multi-pronged initiative, a comprehensive pamphlet on elf rights and history to distribute throughout magical Britain, testimonials from elves about abusive conditions they had endured, economic data showing the financial feasibility of paid elf labor, and most ambitious, a proposed, magical beings Bill of Rights to be submitted to the Wisengamot. Hermione's research on international magical law has been incredibly helpful, Harry noted. France and the Scandinavian countries have much more progressive policies toward non-human magical beings. "How is Harry Potter's schoolwork progressing?" Dobby asked, changing subjects with his characteristic concern for Harry's welfare. Harry Potter must not neglect education for revolution. Harry laughed. With Hermione as my friend? Not possible. She'd sooner let the liberation fail than let me miss an assignment. After updating Dobby on his classes and friendships, Harry ended the call with their usual exchange, "Miss you every day." "Miss Harry Potter more," Dobby replied with a tearful smile. "Be safe. Be smart. You too." As November progressed, Harry felt increasing pressure from multiple directions. Academic demands intensified as professors assigned end-of-term projects. The Gryffindor Quidditch captain, Oliver Wood, had begun lobbying Harry to try out for the team next year after seeing him fly in their first broom lesson. The Elf Liberation campaign required constant attention to counter negative propaganda. And beneath it all ran Harry's private mission to learn more about Voldemort and the prophecy. This last objective led him to initiate a conversation with Dumbledore, requesting a meeting to discuss matters related to my parents and Voldemort. The headmaster agreed readily, inviting Harry to his office after dinner on a Thursday evening. The circular tower room with its silver instruments and phoenix perch fascinated Harry, who recognized several magical devices from Gnarltootha's descriptions of ancient wizard magic. "I see you've noticed my collection," Dumbledore observed, following Harry's gaze. "Some of these were old when I was young, and I was never young." Harry smiled politely at the joke, then got straight to the point. "You mentioned a prophecy concerning Voldemort and me. I'd like to know what it says." Dumbledore's eyebrows rose slightly at Harry's directness. "No preliminaries. No small talk about classes or house points. Those aren't why I'm here," Harry replied simply. "If I'm going to attend Hogwarts and prepare for whatever's coming, I need complete information." The headmaster studied Harry for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. The prophecy was made shortly before your birth by Professor Trelawney during her job interview. In essence, it stated that a child born at the end of July to parents who had thrice defied Voldemort would have the power to vanquish the Dark Lord, a child Voldemort would mark as his equal but who would possess power the Dark Lord knows not." Harry absorbed this, his mind racing. The scar was him marking me? "So I believe," Dumbledore confirmed. "Though I confess, recent events have caused me to reconsider what the power he knows not might be. I once thought it referred primarily to love, your mother's sacrifice and your capacity for compassion despite adversity. Now I wonder if it might also encompass your unique perspective on magical cooperation between different beings." "Or both," Harry suggested. "Indeed. Prophecies are notoriously subject to interpretation, and sometimes to active shaping by those involved." Harry's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "You said Voldemort isn't completely gone. What did you mean?" Dumbledore sighed heavily. "This is where matters grow considerably darker, Harry. I believe Voldemort took steps to preserve his existence even if his body was destroyed. Have you heard of Horcruxes?" Harry shook his head. "They are among the darkest magic imaginable, objects in which a wizard has hidden a fragment of their soul, created through the supreme act of evil, murder. As long as the Horcrux exists, the creator cannot truly die." A chill ran through Harry. "And you think Voldemort made one of these?" "I fear he made several," Dumbledore said gravely. "It would explain his physical transformation before his fall and certain disturbances I've detected in magical objects connected to him." Harry processed this disturbing information. So to defeat him permanently, these Horcruxes would need to be found and destroyed first. "Precisely. I've been researching possible Horcruxes and their locations since shortly after your parents' death." "Have you found any?" Harry asked. Dumbledore hesitated, clearly weighing how much to reveal. "I have strong suspicions about several objects that may have been used. One, I believe, has already been destroyed, though not by my hand." Something in Dumbledore's tone made Harry suddenly uneasy. "What aren't you telling me?" The headmaster's ancient eyes held a profound sadness. "Harry, the night Voldemort attempted to kill you and was thwarted by your mother's sacrifice, something unexpected happened. The killing curse rebounded, but not before a fragment of Voldemort's already damaged soul attached itself to the only living thing it could find. Understanding dawned with horrifying clarity. Me. I'm a Horcrux. I believe so, yes, Dumbledore confirmed gently. Though an accidental one, unlike the others he created deliberately. Harry sat back, momentarily overwhelmed. His scar, the mark of Voldemort's attack, contained a piece of the murderer's soul. The revelation should have disgusted or terrified him, but instead, he felt an odd sense of clarity, as if a puzzle piece he hadn't realized was missing had finally clicked into place. That's why I can speak to snakes, isn't it? I tried it once at the Haven after Nipsey found a garden snake. Dobby was really disturbed by it. Dumbledore nodded. Parseltongue is a rare ability, historically associated with Salazar Slytherin's descendants, including Voldemort. Your ability likely stems from your connection to him. Can it be removed? Harry asked practically. The soul fragment? I believe so, though the process would be extremely dangerous. Harry absorbed this with remarkable composure. We'll need to address that eventually. But first, we should focus on finding and destroying the other Horcruxes. If I'm correct, this changes the rebellion's priorities. Dumbledore looked surprised. The rebellion? I would have thought this revelation would cause you to step back from those activities. Harry shook his head firmly. Just the opposite. If Voldemort returns, he'll target creatures he considers inferior, including free elves. The stronger and more united the magical beings of Britain are, the better positioned will be to stand against him. He leaned forward intently. The elf liberation isn't a distraction from fighting Voldemort, Professor. It's preparation for it. Something like respect flickered in Dumbledore's eyes. You continue to surprise me, Harry. Many adult wizards would be devastated by the news I just delivered, yet you immediately identify strategic implications. Harry shrugged slightly. I've had 8 years of being raised to think beyond myself. Dobby and the others never treated me like a child who needed protection from hard truths. A different approach than I might have taken, Dumbledore acknowledged, but perhaps a wiser one than I realized. As Harry left the headmaster's office that evening, his mind churned with implications. The Horcrux revelation explained so much, his connection to Voldemort, certain magical abilities, even the occasional strange dreams he'd experienced. But it also created new urgency for the liberation movement. He needed to accelerate their plans significantly. If Voldemort was destined to return, the magical beings of Britain needed to be united, not divided by centuries of prejudice and exploitation. Upon returning to Gryffindor Tower, Harry immediately sought out Hermione, pulling her into a quiet corner of the common room. I need your help with research, he whispered urgently. Something called Horcruxes. Hermione's eyes widened. That's extremely dark magic, Harry. It won't be in the regular library. How do you even know that? Harry asked, impressed despite the seriousness of the situation. I've been researching magical soul theory for the elf rights proposal, she explained. Horcruxes were mentioned in a footnote as forbidden magic related to soul manipulation. The actual information would only be in the restricted section, if at all. Harry nodded thoughtfully. We'll need access, then. And we should expand our research team carefully. Over the next weeks, Harry methodically built what he privately termed his War Council, while maintaining his public focus on elf rights. To Hermione, Ron, and Neville, he added Susan Bones from Hufflepuff and, after careful consideration, Padma Patil from Ravenclaw. Both girls had demonstrated independent thinking and a willingness to question traditional wizarding hierarchies. He briefed this core group on a modified version of the Horcrux information, omitting his own status as an accidental Horcrux while emphasizing the connection between defeating Voldemort and uniting magical beings. So you know who isn't actually gone? Ron asked, his freckles standing out against his suddenly pale face. Not completely, Harry confirmed. And when he tries to return, he'll target those he considers weak or inferior first. Including house elves, Hermione added grimly. And Muggle-borns, said Dean Thomas. Half-bloods too, probably, Neville contributed quietly. Anyone not pure blood? Susan Bones looked thoughtful. This changes how we need to approach the elf rights campaign. It's not just about justice anymore, it's about survival. Exactly, Harry agreed. We need to accelerate everything, the education campaign, the legal initiatives, the alliance building with other magical beings. We should also consider practical defense training, suggested Padma practically. If conflict is coming, knowing theory won't be enough. The group unanimously approved this addition to their activities, and Harry found himself leading impromptu defense lessons in empty classrooms, sharing the combat magic he'd learned from Gnarltooth and other warrior elves. December arrived with mounting tensions both at Hogwarts and in the wider wizarding world. The Daily Prophet reported increasing elf disturbances, as conservative families attempted to reimpose control through magical contracts or intimidation. The Ministry, under pressure from traditional pure-blood factions, had begun discussing regulations on unaffiliated magical creatures, thinly veiled attempts to restrict free elf movement and employment. Most concerning was a suspicious fire at a building in Diagon Alley that had been serving as a placement office for free elves seeking work. Though no elves were injured, the message was clear: opposition to the liberation was turning violent. Harry, monitoring these developments from Hogwarts with growing concern, made a difficult decision. During his nightly communication with the Haven Council, he proposed moving up their most ambitious initiative. We can't wait until spring to submit the Magical Beings' Rights Act to the Wizengamot, he argued. The opposition is organizing faster than we anticipated, and the longer we wait, the more ground we lose. Winter session of Wizengamot notoriously conservative, Gnarltooth cautioned. Many progressive members travel during holidays. Exactly why our opponents would never expect us to move now, Harry countered. Plus, I'll be able to attend in person during the Christmas break. After lengthy debate, the council agreed. The proposed legislation, drafted by Andromeda Tonks with input from elf representatives, goblin consultants, and Hermione's research on international precedents, would be formally submitted at the December 21 Wizengamot session, coinciding symbolically with the winter solstice. As the end of term approached, Harry coordinated final preparations with his Hogwarts allies while maintaining his academic obligations. The balancing act left him exhausted but determined, driven by the dual knowledge of Voldemort's eventual return and the escalating backlash against elf freedom. The day before students were to depart for Christmas break, Harry received an urgent message from Dobby via their communication mirror. Emergency at the Haven, Dobby reported, his expression grim. 3 elves attacked while gathering supplies in Hogsmeade. 1 critically injured. Attackers wore masks but used distinctive curses. Death Eaters? Harry asked sharply. Not confirmed, but curse signatures match Dark Mark followers, Dobby replied. Gnarltooth believes attack specifically targeted elves connected to Harry Potter. Harry's blood ran cold. I'm coming back tomorrow anyway. We'll increase security immediately. There's more, Dobby continued reluctantly. Wizard delegation from Ministry attempted to enter Haven boundaries today. Led by witch named Umbridge. Claimed to be executing inspection of unregistered magical settlement, by Minister's authority. Could they get through the protections? Dobby shook his head. Boundaries held, but they threatened to return with curse breakers. Called us dangerous, unregulated creatures harboring a kidnapped wizard child. Harry's jaw tightened. They're trying to provoke a confrontation before the Wizengamot session. We can't give them what they want. Dobby knows. Council implementing contingency plans. But Harry Potter should be careful returning tomorrow. Might be watched. After ending the call, Harry immediately sought out Hermione, Ron, and Neville to brief them on the developments. Hermione offered to research emergency legal protections for the Haven's territory, while Ron, whose father worked at the Ministry, promised to ask for inside information on Umbridge's authority. Neville, who had grown considerably more confident during their defense training sessions, made perhaps the most practical suggestion: "You shouldn't travel alone tomorrow, Harry. We should all go with you to the Haven instead of our regular holiday plans." Harry was touched by the offer but shook his head. "Too dangerous right now. But I do need a secure way to travel." A thought struck him. "Actually, I think I know who to ask." That evening, Harry made his way to Professor McGonagall's office, where he presented his situation with the straightforward gravity that had gradually earned his head of house's respect over the term. "Professor, I have reason to believe there may be attempts to interfere with my holiday travel plans. Given recent threats against elves associated with me, I'm concerned about returning to my home safely." McGonagall's lips thinned with evident disapproval, not at Harry, but at the situation. "I've seen the reports, Mr. Potter. Deplorable behavior, targeting innocent beings simply for exercising their rights." She considered for a moment. "I believe we can arrange secure transportation directly from Hogwarts. Perhaps Professor Dumbledore himself would be willing to escort you." "Thank you, Professor," Harry said sincerely. "There's something else you should know. The Elf Rights Coalition will be submitting comprehensive legislation to the Wizengamot next week. We anticipate significant opposition, possibly including attempts to discredit me personally or question my living situation." McGonagall's expression softened slightly. "You've taken on responsibilities far beyond your years, Mr. Potter. Are you certain this is what you wish to focus on during your time at Hogwarts?" Harry met her gaze steadily. "It's not just about elf rights anymore, Professor. It's about preparing the wizarding world for challenges ahead, including Voldemort's potential return." To her credit, McGonagall didn't flinch at the name, though her eyes widened slightly. "Professor Dumbledore has shared his concerns with you, then?" "Some of them," Harry acknowledged. "Enough to know that divided magical communities are vulnerable communities." McGonagall studied him for a long moment. "You are remarkably like your mother in some ways, Mr. Potter." She too had an uncanny ability to see connections others missed, particularly regarding the human, or perhaps I should say sentient, consequences of magical policy. She straightened. "I will arrange your transportation personally, and—" She hesitated, then continued with evident decision, "Should you require a character reference for the Wizengamot proceedings, you may call upon me." "Thank you, Professor," Harry said, genuinely moved by the offer. "That would be invaluable." The following morning, while other students boarded the Hogwarts Express, Harry met Dumbledore and McGonagall in the headmaster's office. As arranged, Dobby would apparate to a specific location outside Hogwarts boundaries, where Dumbledore himself would escort Harry to ensure no interference. "I understand you'll be quite busy this holiday, Harry," Dumbledore remarked as they walked toward the designated meeting point. "The Wizengamot session promises to be eventful." "You've heard about the legislation?" Harry asked, not entirely surprised. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. "I am Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot, after all. Very little happens there without my knowledge, though I confess the specific contents of your proposal remain a mystery. Might I inquire as to its general thrust?" "Comprehensive legal personhood and protected rights for all sentient magical beings," Harry summarized. "Starting with house elves but extending to goblins, centaurs, mere-people, any magical being capable of rational thought and moral choice." "Ambitious," Dumbledore commented. "Some would say revolutionary." "Revolutionary would have been demanding reparations and punishment for centuries of enslavement," Harry replied evenly. "This is simply asking for basic dignity and self-determination going forward." Dumbledore nodded thoughtfully. "A fair point. You should know, Harry, that while I cannot openly advocate for specific legislation as Chief Warlock, I have long supported improved conditions for magical beings. The timing and approach may differ from what I might have chosen, but the goal is one I share." They reached the boundary point where Dobby waited, his large eyes watchful for any sign of threat. After scanning the area carefully, Dumbledore nodded his approval. "Safe journey, Harry. I'll see you at the Wizengamot session," though we may find ourselves in different roles there than our usual headmaster and student. Thank you for understanding, Professor, Harry said, taking Dobby's outstretched hand. Understanding is perhaps the most important magic we can practice, Dumbledore replied with a slight smile. More powerful than any spell and far more rare. With a crack, Harry and Dobby vanished, leaving Dumbledore gazing thoughtfully at the spot where they'd stood. They reappeared at the Haven's secure apparition point, a location known only to council members and key allies. The settlement had changed dramatically since Harry's departure for Hogwarts. What had once been a hidden refuge now resembled a proper village, with dozens of new structures and clear signs of permanent infrastructure. Had to expand significantly, Dobby explained as they walked toward the council building. Over 300 elves living here now, plus 50 wizard allies and their families. Wizard families are living here? Harry asked, surprised. Dobby nodded. Mostly supporters who lost jobs or homes for employing free elves. Haven offering sanctuary both ways now. The political implications were significant. The Haven had evolved from a refuge into the physical embodiment of a new social model, elves and wizards living together as equals. The council chamber buzzed with activity as Harry entered. Maps, documents, and magical communication devices covered the tables where representatives from various magical being groups conferred urgently. Andromeda Tonks was reviewing legal scrolls with Gnarltooth, while a goblin Harry didn't recognize examined financial projections with Mipsy. Harry Potter returns, announced Gorby, causing conversations to pause as everyone turned to greet him. For the next several hours, Harry received detailed briefings on developments in his absence. The situation had grown more complex than their nightly communications had conveyed. Opposition to elf liberation had coalesced around several pureblood families, the Malfoys, Knotts, Parkinsons, and Carrow's chief among them, who had formed an association for wizarding tradition to lobby against changing the status of magical beings. More concerning were reports of coordinated attacks against free elves and their wizard allies that bore hallmarks of former Death Eater tactics. While none had been definitively linked to Voldemort supporters, the pattern suggested organized dark wizardry rather than random vigilantism. Most troubling is infiltration of ministry, reported a scarred elf named Grimly who handled intelligence gathering. Umbridge Woman Building Department specifically to regulate magical creatures. Much anti-elf sentiment in legislation being drafted. What about our legislation? Harry asked. Are we still on schedule? Andromeda nodded. The Magical Beings' Rights Act is ready for submission. We've secured sponsors from 3 of the 4 Wisengamot blocks, the Progressive Alliance, the Neutrals, and even 2 members of the Traditionalist Moderate faction. Only the Preservation bloc stands completely opposed. And the numbers? Harry pressed. Too close to call, Andromeda admitted. Much depends on the hearing itself. Which is why your testimony is crucial, Harry. As the boy who lived advocating for this change, you bring moral authority that's difficult to dismiss. Harry nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. What about the guardianship issue? Will that be raised to discredit me? Almost certainly, Andromeda confirmed. Umbridge's faction will argue that you're too young to understand the implications of what you're advocating and that you've been unduly influenced by the elves who raised you. Counterarguments? We emphasize your academic performance at Hogwarts, provide testimony from professors regarding your maturity, and most importantly, demonstrate that your advocacy stems from ethical reasoning rather than emotional manipulation. Andromeda smiled slightly. Being articulate, composed, and thoroughly knowledgeable about the issues will be your best defense. The meeting continued late into the night, covering security arrangements for the Wisengamot appearance, media strategy, and contingency plans for various scenarios. By the time Harry finally retired to his cottage, his mind was racing with details and strategies. Dobby, who had been quietly supportive throughout the marathon session, accompanied him. Harry Potter has grown much in few months at Hogwarts, the elf observed as they walked. Speaking like experienced diplomat now. Harry smiled tiredly. I've had good teachers, both at the Haven and Hogwarts. And motivating challenges. Harry Potter needs proper rest before big day, Dobby insisted. Dobby has prepared your favorite foods for tomorrow, and Mipsy made special strengthening potion for clear thinking during testimony. As they reached Harry's cottage, he turned to his guardian with sudden emotion. Dobby, whatever happens at the Wizengamot, I want you to know that freeing you from the Malfoys was the best thing that ever happened to me. You didn't just save me from the Dursleys, you gave me purpose. Dobby's enormous eyes filled with tears. And Harry Potter gave Dobby and all elves hope. Fair exchange. The days leading up to the Wizengamot session passed in a blur of preparation. Harry practiced his testimony extensively with Andromeda playing the role of hostile questioners. Security protocols were refined as intelligence suggested possible attempts to prevent Harry from appearing before the Wizengamot. On the morning of December 21st, the winter solstice and exactly 6 months after the liberation ritual, Harry dressed in formal robes that symbolically blended wizarding and elvish styles. The deep green fabric was traditional enough for wizarding formality while incorporating subtle elf symbols of freedom in the embroidery. Remember, Andromeda advised as their delegation prepared to depart, maintain your composure regardless of provocation. Some members will deliberately try to anger or fluster you to undermine your credibility. Harry nodded, centering himself with the meditation techniques Gnarltooth had taught him. I'm ready. Their arrival at the Ministry of Magic via a series of security-enhanced apparition jumps had been carefully planned to avoid both publicity and potential interference. Nevertheless, the atrium bustled with unusual activity for a holiday session, with reporters from various publications clearly anticipating something significant. Word has leaked, Andromeda murmured as they moved swiftly toward the lifts, flanked by 2 former Aurors who had joined the elf rights movement. We'll need to avoid comments until after the session. The Wizengamot chamber itself imposed a sense of ancient authority with its tiered stone seating and elaborate magical ceiling resembling a more somber version of the one at Hogwarts. Members in plum-colored robes were already taking their places as Harry's delegation entered through a side door, attracting immediate notice and hushed conversation. Dumbledore, in his capacity as Chief Warlock, sat at the central podium reviewing documents. He glanced up as Harry entered, offering a nearly imperceptible nod of acknowledgement before returning to his preparations. The sponsors will present the legislation first, Andromeda whispered to Harry as they took their seats in the designated area for those presenting to the Wizengamot. Then supporting testimony, then opposition statements. You'll speak third among the supporters. Harry scanned the chamber, noting familiar faces, Madame Bones sitting with the moderates, Lucius Malfoy among the preservation block, and somewhat surprisingly, Professor McGonagall in the visitors' gallery, her expression one of dignified support. At precisely 10 o'clock, Dumbledore rose, bringing immediate silence to the chamber. The December session of the Wizengamot is hereby convened, he announced, his voice magically amplified. Today's primary agenda item is the first reading of proposed legislation titled the Magical Beings Rights Act of 1991. The chair recognizes Lady Augusta Longbottom to present the bill. Neville's formidable grandmother rose from her seat, her vulture-topped hat drawing eyes as she moved to the central speaking position. With impressive clarity, she outlined the legislation's core provisions: legal recognition of personhood for all sentient magical beings, prohibition of forced servitude, establishment of fair labor standards for those choosing employment, and creation of a Magical Beings Affairs Department to replace the existing creature control divisions. As she concluded, murmurs swept the chamber, some supportive, others clearly outraged. Dumbledore maintained order with a raised hand before recognizing the first opposition speaker, a wizard Harry didn't recognize but whose rhetoric immediately established him as a hardline traditionalist. This proposed legislation represents nothing less than an attack on the fundamental structures of wizarding society, the man declared pompously. House elves and other magical creatures have existed in their current relationships with wizard kind for centuries, with good reason. Their magic is fundamentally different from ours, requiring the guidance and structure that our traditions provide. Harry maintained his composed expression despite the blatant falsehoods, noting that several Wisingamot members were nodding in agreement while others looked skeptical or openly dismissive. 3 more speakers, 2 supporting, 1 opposing, addressed the chamber before Dumbledore finally called, "The chair recognizes Mr. Harry James Potter to provide testimony regarding the proposed legislation." A hush fell as Harry rose and moved to the speaker's position. At 11 years old, he made a striking figure, smaller than the adult wizards who had preceded him but carrying himself with unmistakable purpose. "Honored members of the Wisingamot," Harry began, his voice clear and steady despite his youth. "I stand before you not just as Harry Potter, but as someone with a unique perspective on the matter before you. For the past 8 years, I have lived among free elves, learning both wizard and elf magic, and experiencing firsthand the reality that elves are fully sentient beings capable of self-determination." He paused, making eye contact with various members before continuing. "The traditional narrative suggests that house elves need binding to wizards for their magic to function properly. This is demonstrably false. The elves of the Haven, now numbering over 300, use magic more powerful and versatile than bound elves precisely because they channel it according to their own will and purpose." Harry proceeded to outline specific examples, backed by magical theory that Gnarltooth had helped him understand. He explained the history of the binding, how an ancient temporary alliance had been corrupted into permanent servitude, and described the cultural richness of free elf society that had been suppressed for centuries. "Some will question whether a child my age can understand these complex issues," he acknowledged directly, addressing the anticipated attack. "But I would suggest that children often see injustice more clearly than adults who have grown accustomed to it. The enslavement of sentient beings is wrong, not because I was raised by elves to believe so, but because it violates the fundamental magical principle that intent matters in all magic." As Harry concluded his prepared remarks, the chamber remained silent, many members visibly processing his arguments. Then Dumbledore spoke, "The witness will now take questions from members. The chair recognizes Madame Dolores Umbridge." Harry had been briefed extensively on Umbridge, a squat, toad-like witch with a deceptively girlish voice that belied her hardline anti-creature politics. She rose, wearing a saccharine smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Potter," she began in her high-pitched tone, "your unusual upbringing is certainly interesting. But surely you must acknowledge that having been raised from a very young age by these creatures, elves," Harry corrected politely but firmly. Umbridge's smile tightened. "By these elves, you have naturally absorbed their perspective without the benefit of proper wizarding context. Isn't it possible that your views have been shaped by those who effectively kidnapped you?" Murmurs rippled through the chamber at the provocative framing. Harry maintained his composure, remembering Andromeda's coaching. "I was not kidnapped, Madame Umbridge. I was rescued from documented abuse and neglect. The Dursley family's mistreatment of me is a matter of public record, as is the fact that Albus Dumbledore placed me there without adequate safeguards or monitoring." He turned slightly to address the broader Wisingamot. "As for my perspective being shaped by my upbringing, of course it has been, just as every witch and wizard in this chamber has been shaped by theirs. The relevant question isn't whether my views have been influenced by my experiences, but whether those views are supported by evidence and ethical reasoning." From the gallery, Harry heard a distinct humph that sounded suspiciously like Professor McGonagall's approval. Umbridge, momentarily thrown off balance, rallied with a different angle. "The wizarding families who have employed house elves for generations report that elves become distressed when offered freedom. How do you explain this apparent contradiction to your claims?" "Centuries of conditioning," Harry replied promptly. "When beings are taught from birth that their purpose is service and that freedom is frightening, of course many initially reject it. We've seen similar patterns in human history with institutionalized groups. But given education, support, and genuine choice, elves consistently thrive in freedom." The questioning continued for nearly an hour, with members from various factions probing Harry's knowledge and reasoning. Throughout, he maintained his composure, answering factually and occasionally deferring to Andromeda on specific legal points. The session's dynamic shifted notably when Madame Bones asked Harry to elaborate on the connection between magical being rights and security concerns. There is evidence, Harry stated carefully, that dark wizards who previously supported Voldemort, gasps echoed at the name, specifically target magical beings they consider lesser for both exploitation and violence. A united magical community where all beings have protected rights would be significantly more resilient against any future dark wizard threats. Lucius Malfoy immediately requested recognition. Mr. Potter appears to be suggesting that those who support traditional roles for magical creatures are somehow aligned with he who must not be named. This inflammatory accusation, I made no such specific accusation, Harry interrupted calmly. I simply stated factual information about patterns of targeted violence against free elves, which the Department of Magical Law Enforcement has documented. If certain parties feel implicated by those facts, perhaps they should examine why. A ripple of surprised murmurs and even a few quickly stifled laughs suggested Harry had scored a significant point. Malfoy's pale face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, Dumbledore intervened. The chair reminds all participants to maintain decorum and avoid personalizing the debate. We will now hear testimony from representatives of the affected magical beings themselves. What followed was unprecedented in Wizengamot history. Dobby, representing free elves, and a goblin diplomatic representative named Gornick took turns addressing the chamber, outlining their community's perspectives on the proposed legislation. Dobby, dressed in his formal attire and speaking with dignified conviction, made perhaps the most impactful statement: elves do not seek to overthrow wizards or destroy traditions. We seek only the right to choose our path and to have our choices respected under law. Some elves will still choose to serve wizard families, but as paid employees with dignity, not as property without rights. The session extended well beyond its scheduled conclusion, with debate growing increasingly substantive as initial posturing gave way to serious consideration of the issues. By late afternoon, it became clear that the legislation had sufficient support to pass to the committee stage, a crucial first victory, though many hurdles remained before final passage. As Dumbledore formally concluded the session, scheduling committee hearings for January, Harry felt simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated. They hadn't won completely, but they had secured a legitimate place in the legislative process, something unimaginable just a year earlier. "You were outstanding," Andromeda told him as they gathered their materials. "Particularly in handling Umbridge and Malfoy. Your composure under fire was remarkable." Before Harry could respond, Professor McGonagall approached their group, her expression one of unmistakable pride. "Mr. Potter," she said formally, though her eyes conveyed warmer sentiment, "that was one of the most impressive displays of reasoned advocacy I have witnessed in these chambers. 20 points to Gryffindor for exemplary civil discourse." Harry smiled at the unexpected award. "Thank you, Professor. Your presence was encouraging. Hogwarts faculty should support students' growth in all constructive directions," McGonagall replied. More quietly, she added, "Your mother would have been fiercely proud today, Harry. She never tolerated injustice in any form." The mention of his mother touched Harry deeply. Before he could formulate a response, they were interrupted by the approach of a wizard Harry recognized from newspaper photos, Cornelius Fudge, the Minister for Magic himself. "Mr. Potter," Fudge began somewhat awkwardly, twisting his bowler hat in his hands. "Most impressive presentation. Most impressive indeed. Perhaps we might arrange a meeting to discuss certain compromises that could make this transition smoother for all concerned." Harry exchanged glances with Andromeda, who gave a slight nod. "I'd be happy to discuss implementation details, Minister," Harry replied diplomatically, though the core principles of freedom and legal personhood aren't subject to compromise. Fudge's expression suggested this wasn't quite the opening he'd hoped for, but he maintained a politician's smile. Of course. My office will be in touch after the holidays." As the minister moved away, Dobby approached, his expression serious. Harry Potter should know, Dobby overheard Malfoy and Umbridge speaking after session. They mentioned alternative measures if legislation proceeds. Sounded like threat. Harry nodded grimly. We expected this. They'll try to undermine us outside the legitimate process when they realize they might lose within it. We should accelerate security protocols at the Haven, Andromeda suggested. And perhaps reconsider your return to Hogwarts arrangements, Harry. Agreed, Harry replied. But first, we should celebrate today's progress. This was a historic step forward, whatever comes next. That evening, the Haven erupted in cautious celebration as news of the Wizengamot hearing spread. Elves and their wizard allies gathered in the central clearing, where Mipsy had organized a feast combining traditional elf cuisine with wizard holiday favorites. As Harry moved through the gathering, accepting congratulations and discussing next steps with various community members, he noticed a small commotion at the settlement's boundary point. Seconds later, a runner approached him urgently. Harry Potter. Visitors requesting entry, Hogwarts students. Surprised and concerned, Harry hurried to the boundary where he found Hermione, Ron, and Neville waiting, all looking slightly nervous but determined. What are you doing here? Harry asked, genuinely shocked. How did you find this place? Hermione stepped forward. We used the location spell you taught us for emergencies. We came because we have information you need to hear immediately. Harry hesitated only briefly before authorizing their entry. As the three crossed the boundary, their eyes widened at the sight of the Haven in full celebration mode. Blimey, Ron breathed, taking in the scores of free elves interacting as equals with wizards. It's like another world. That's rather the point, Harry noted with a slight smile. Now what's this urgent information? Hermione glanced around. We should speak privately. It's about, well, several things, but mainly about something Ron's father overheard at the ministry after the Wizengamot session. Harry led them to his cottage, where Dobby immediately provided refreshments despite the unexpected guests. Once they were settled, Hermione took the lead. First, you should know your testimony was brilliant, it's all over the wireless. They're calling it the Potter doctrine of magical equality. But that's not why we came. Ron leaned forward. Dad works at the ministry, and he overheard Umbridge meeting with some unspeakables after the session. They were discussing something called Operation Restoration, some kind of magical countermeasure to reverse the elf liberation. Harry's blood ran cold. Did he hear any specifics? Ron shook his head. Not technical details, but he heard enough to know they're planning to implement it soon, possibly before the next Wizengamot session in January. There's more, Neville added quietly. My grandmother stayed after the session for a Wizengamot elders meeting. She told me several members received anonymous threats warning them to oppose the legislation or face consequences. Classic intimidation tactics, Harry noted grimly. But that's not the worst part, Hermione concluded. While researching Horcruxes, I found references to something called the Binding Codex, an ancient text that contains the original spells used to bind magical creatures to wizard service. Harry exchanged a startled look with Dobby. We have the Codex. It's what we used to break the binding in the first place. Hermione nodded eagerly. Exactly. But according to my research, there were 3 original copies. You have one, but the ministry might have another, Harry finished, the implications sinking in. And they could be planning to use it to reimpose the binding. It wouldn't work completely, Dobby interjected. Original ritual required willing participation of both elves and wizards. But modified version could cause great harm, great confusion among elves whose freedom is still new. Harry's mind raced through possibilities. We need to locate the ministry's copy immediately and either secure or neutralize it. And we need to warn all free elves about possible magical attacks on their autonomy. What had begun as a celebration quickly transformed into a crisis response session. The council convened, with Harry's Hogwarts friends invited to share their information directly. Plans were developed for both defensive measures and a preemptive operation to locate the ministry's Codex copy. Infiltrating the Department of Mysteries would be extremely dangerous, Andromeda cautioned. The magical defenses there are among the strongest in Britain. We don't necessarily need to infiltrate, Harry countered. We just need to determine if they have the Codex and if they're actively preparing to use it. For that, we need intelligence, not a raid. Creature might help, suggested Mipsy unexpectedly. The name clearly meant something to the elves, though Harry and his friends looked confused. Creature is house elf serving black family, Dobby explained. Very old, very traditional. Still bound but unstable since death of favorite master. He knows Department of Mysteries from when his master worked there. How would we contact him? Harry asked. And why would he help us? Andromeda looked thoughtful. The Black family home at Grimald Place has been essentially abandoned since my aunt's death. Creature should be there alone. And as a Black by birth, I might be able to gain entry, though I was disowned for marrying Ted. Would Creature recognize your authority? Gorby asked skeptically. Probably not willingly, Andromeda admitted. But there might be another approach. The current legal heir to the Black family is my cousin Sirius, who happens to be your godfather, Harry, though he's currently in Azkaban. If we could establish a connection based on your relationship to the Black heir. Wait, Harry interrupted, startled. My godfather is in Azkaban. Why? What did he do? An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Finally, Andromeda answered carefully, Sirius was accused of betraying your parents to Voldemort and murdering Peter Pettigrew along with 12 muggles. He was imprisoned without trial during the chaos following Voldemort's fall. Without trial? Hermione exclaimed, outraged. That's completely illegal under both wizarding and muggle law. Many procedures were overlooked during that period, Andromeda acknowledged grimly. The evidence against Sirius seemed overwhelming at the time, but I've always had doubts. He was fiercely loyal to your father, Harry. This new information hit Harry like a physical blow. Another connection to his parents, his own godfather, had been hidden from him. Whether guilty or innocent, Sirius Black represented yet another piece of Harry's history that had been obscured. We need to investigate this, Harry decided firmly. But first, let's focus on the immediate threat. How do we approach Creature? After extensive discussion, a plan emerged. Andromeda would attempt to enter Grimald Place under her birth connection to the Black family. If successful, she would engage Creature in conversation about the Department of Mysteries, attempting to extract information about the Codex without revealing their specific interest. I should go with you, Harry insisted. If Creature responds to the Black family connection, my link to Sirius might strengthen the approach. Despite concerns about Harry's safety, the council eventually agreed that the potential intelligence was worth the calculated risk. They would attempt the Creature contact the following day, while simultaneously enhancing the Haven's magical defenses against any ministry countermeasures. As the meeting concluded, Harry pulled his 3 school friends aside. You should return to your families for Christmas. This could get dangerous, and you've already taken a huge risk coming here. Ron snorted. And missed the most exciting wizard revolution in centuries? Not likely. My parents already know I'm involved with elf rights advocacy, Hermione added. I left them a note explaining I'm helping with important legal research. They'll understand. Gran's on the Wisengamot committee reviewing the legislation, Neville said simply. She'd be disappointed if I didn't help. Their loyalty touched Harry deeply. You're all amazing, you know that. But this isn't a game. There could be real consequences. We know, Hermione replied soberly. But that's true of everything important, isn't it? Standing by while others fight injustice has consequences too. Harry couldn't argue with that logic. Alright, but you follow security protocols exactly. And you keep communication mirrors with you at all times. As his friends agreed to these terms, Harry felt a complex mixture of emotions, concern for their safety, pride in their commitment, and a deep appreciation for the bonds they'd formed at Hogwarts. Whatever challenges lay ahead in the fight for magical being rights or the eventual confrontation with Voldemort, he would not face them alone. The next morning dawned cold and clear as Harry, Dobby, Andromeda, and a security detail of 3 combat-trained elves prepared to visit Grimald Place. Hermione had spent half the night researching Black family magic and ancestral home defenses, providing a detailed briefing that impressed even Andromeda. The house will have multiple layers of protection, Andromeda explained as they made final preparations. Blood wards, detection charms, possibly even cursed objects. Stay close to me, don't touch anything without asking, and let me speak to Creature first. They apparat to a small park across from a row of grim-looking townhouses in London. Number 12 was conspicuously absent from the sequence, visible only to those who knew it existed. Focus on number 12, Grimald Place between 11 and 13, Andromeda instructed Harry and Dobby. The others would maintain a perimeter outside. As Harry concentrated on the address, a battered door emerged between the 2 neighboring houses, followed by dirty windows and walls pushing their way out as if inflating from nothing. Soon a complete townhouse stood before them, looking significantly more neglected than its neighbors. The Fidelius charm has weakened since my aunt's death, Andromeda observed. Otherwise, we couldn't have seen it at all without the secret keeper. She approached the door cautiously, placing her palm against the tarnished silver knocker shaped like a serpent. Andromeda Black Tonks, request entry by right of blood. For several tense moments, nothing happened. Then the serpent knocker animated, its metal tongue flicking out to taste the air near Andromeda's hand. Blood recognized, though tainted, hissed a voice from the knocker. Limited access granted. The door swung open with an ominous creak, revealing a dusty, dark hallway lined with grotesque decorations including what appeared to be mounted house elf heads on the wall. Harry felt Dobby stiffen beside him at the horrific sight. Barbaric custom, the elf whispered. Old families displayed deceased elves as trophies. They moved cautiously through the entrance hall, Andromeda leading the way with her wand illuminated. The house felt oppressive, filled with dark magic residue that made Harry's skin crawl. Creature. Andromeda called softly. House elf of the most noble house of Black. Are you present? A shuffling sound came from further inside the house, followed by muttering, Mistress's niece returns, the blood traitor who married filth, oh what would my poor mistress say? Creature should not answer, no, Creature should not. An ancient house elf appeared at the end of the hallway, looking far older and more decrepit than any elf Harry had seen. His skin hung in folds, and he wore only a filthy loincloth. His bloodshot eyes widened further when he saw Harry and Dobby. What is this? A Potter spawn in the noble house? N.A. He stared at Dobby's clothes with evident horror. A disgraced elf wearing the garments of wizards. Abomination. Creature, Andromeda said firmly, I've come to inquire about your former Master Regulus's work. It's a matter of importance to the Black family legacy. At the mention of Regulus, something changed in Creature's demeanor. The hostility remained, but a flash of what might have been grief crossed his features. Master Regulus? What does Blood Traitor want with Master Regulus? He died serving the Dark Lord, he did, unlike his treacherous brother. Harry stepped forward carefully. Creature, I'm Harry Potter. My godfather is Sirius Black. Creature's reaction was immediate and violent. The prisoner. The one who broke Mistress's heart. Friend of blood traitors and mudbloods. He is no true Black. Yet he is the legal heir to this house, Andromeda pointed out smoothly. And Harry, as his godson, has an interest in Black family matters, including certain magical artifacts that might have been stored here. What artifacts? Creature asked suspiciously, his gnarled hands clutching at his loincloth. Creature protects family treasures, yes he does, keeps them safe from thieves and filth. Harry glanced at Dobby, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod, they needed to change approach. Creature, Harry said gently, we're not here to take anything from the house. We're trying to protect magical artifacts from being misused by the Ministry, including texts that might have belonged to the Department of Mysteries, where Regulus worked. Something flickered in Creature's eyes, recognition, perhaps, or calculation. Ministry thieves, he muttered. Always wanting black treasures. Master Regulus took what was rightfully his, he did. Took it to destroy the Dark Lord, but Creature failed him. His voice broke, and to Harry's astonishment, the old elf began to sob. Failed last order, couldn't destroy it, the locket. Harry and Andromeda exchanged confused glances. This wasn't about the Codex at all, but something else, something that clearly caused Creature immense distress. Creature, Dobby said, speaking for the first time since entering the house, what locket? What did Master Regulus order? Creature's head snapped up, his expression torn between habitual disdain for a disgraced elf and the desperate need to unburden himself of a long-held secret. Not telling clothes-wearing elf, he spat, then immediately contradicted himself by continuing, Master Regulus volunteered Creature to the Dark Lord for special task. Dark Lord took Creature to cave, made Creature drink terrible potion, left Creature to die after hiding locket in basin. But Master called Creature home. The story poured out in broken fragments, how Regulus had learned what the locket truly was, a Horcrux containing a piece of Voldemort's soul, how he had returned to the cave with Creature, sacrificing himself to retrieve the Horcrux and ordering Creature to destroy it, how Creature had tried and failed to damage the locket, which now remained hidden somewhere in the house. Harry listened with growing excitement and horror. This was directly relevant to what Dumbledore had told him about Voldemort's path to immortality, and potentially far more important than their original mission regarding the Codex. Creature, he said urgently, that locket is extremely important. It's key to defeating Voldemort permanently. If you show it to us, we might be able to destroy it where you couldn't, fulfilling your promise to Regulus. The elf's bloodshot eyes studied Harry suspiciously. Why would Potter Brat help complete Creature's order? Potter Brat should want Dark Lord's treasure. Because Voldemort killed my parents, Harry replied simply. And because no one, wizard, elf, or any magical being, should live under his tyranny again. Something in Harry's sincerity seemed to reach through Creature's distrust. After a long, tense silence, the old elf shuffled toward a nearby staircase. Follow Creature. But touch nothing else, blood traders and clothes wearers. The locket, when Creature eventually produced it from a hidden compartment in what had been Regulus's bedroom, emanated dark magic so potent that Harry's scar burned in its presence. The heavy gold oval bore an ornate S inlaid with green stones, clearly Slytherin's mark. This is definitely a Horcrux, Harry confirmed, careful not to touch it directly. Dobby, can you create a containment bag like the one Gnarltooth made for the cursed artifacts we found last year? Dobby nodded, conjuring a silvery pouch with elvish protective runes. Using magic rather than physical contact, they secured the locket inside. Creature, Harry said seriously, you've done a great service to both the Black family and the wizarding world today. When this locket is destroyed, Regulus's sacrifice will have helped defeat Voldemort. The ancient elf's expression remained suspicious, but something like hope flickered in his eyes. Potter Brat will destroy it. Complete Master Regulus's final order. I promise, Harry vowed. And when it's done, I'll make sure you know. Their departure from Grimald Place was hastened by Creature's deteriorating cooperation, his moments of lucidity giving way to renewed muttering about blood traders and clothes-wearing elves. Once safely back at the Haven, Harry immediately called an emergency council meeting to share their unexpected discovery. A Horcrux, Gnarltooth breathed, examining the contained locket with evident revulsion. Dark magic of the worst kind. Splitting the soul violates the fundamental laws of magical existence. This is one of the objects Dumbledore mentioned, Harry confirmed. Part of why Voldemort didn't die completely when the killing curse rebounded. But how do we destroy it? Hermione asked practically. According to my research, Horcruxes are nearly indestructible by conventional means. Basilisk venom, Andromeda suggested. Fiend fire. Perhaps goblin-forged weapons imbued with destructive elements. All extremely dangerous methods. What about combined elf magic? Harry proposed, looking to Gnarltooth and Dobby. If the solstice liberation ritual could break centuries-old bindings, could a similar approach work against a Horcrux? The discussion continued for hours, eventually concluding that while their original mission to locate the Ministry's Codex remained important, the Horcrux discovery represented a potential game-changer in the broader conflict. They would need to consult Dumbledore, despite lingering trust issues, as he had the most comprehensive knowledge of Voldemort's Horcruxes. Late that night, as Harry prepared a secure message to Dumbledore requesting an urgent meeting, he reflected on how dramatically their situation had evolved. What had begun as a simple rescue of a neglected child had grown into a movement for magical being rights, which now intersected directly with the fight against Voldemort's potential return. The connections weren't coincidental, he realized. The same prejudices and power structures that enabled elf enslavement had created fertile ground for Voldemort's pure-blood supremacist ideology. Fighting one meant necessarily confronting the other. As he finished the message and prepared for bed, Dobby appeared with a steaming mug of hot chocolate, a small tradition they'd maintained since Harry's early days at the Haven. "Big discoveries today," Dobby observed, sitting beside Harry on the edge of his bed. "Changes many things." Harry nodded, sipping the sweet, warming drink. "It feels like everything's accelerating, the legislation, the opposition, the Horcrux hunt. I wonder if we're ready." "No one ever truly ready for revolution or war," Dobby replied with unexpected wisdom. "But Harry Potter has built strong foundation. Free elves, wizard allies, Hogwarts friends, all working together. That is strength Voldemort never had." "I hope it's enough," Harry said softly. Dobby placed his small hand on Harry's shoulder. "Most powerful magic not in spells or rituals. Most powerful magic in connections between beings who choose to stand together." As Harry drifted towards sleep that night, he found himself believing Dobby might be right. The path ahead remained dangerous and uncertain, but they would face it as a united front, elves, wizards, and other magical beings working together toward both liberation and survival. The revolution had entered a new phase, one that might ultimately determine not just the future of elf rights, but the fate of the entire magical world. Chapter 3, The War Begins. Dumbledore arrived at the Haven at dawn 3 days after Christmas, his appearance marked by none of his usual twinkling humor. The headmaster studied the contained Horcrux with grave intensity, his wand moving in complex diagnostic patterns over the shielded locket. "Remarkable," he murmured, looking up at Harry, Dobby, and the assembled council members. "You've accomplished in days what I've been searching for over years." "It was mostly luck," Harry admitted. "We weren't looking for a Horcrux at all, just information about the binding codex." "Fortune favors the prepared," Dumbledore replied. "And you were certainly prepared to recognize the significance of Creature's story where others might have dismissed the ravings of an unstable elf." Dobby straightened proudly beside Harry. "Harry Potter listens to all magical beings with respect. Makes him better wizard than most." Dumbledore acknowledged this with a slight nod. "Indeed. Now, regarding destruction methods, I've successfully destroyed one Horcrux already, a ring that belonged to Voldemort's maternal grandfather. I used the Sword of Gryffindor, which imbibed basilisk venom during Godric's famous battle with the Serpent of Slytherin." "The sword is at Hogwarts?" Harry asked. "In my office, yes. However." Dumbledore hesitated, studying the assembled elves with new consideration. "I wonder if there might be another approach worth exploring first. The magic your community performed during the solstice liberation was unlike anything I've witnessed in a century of magical study. It operated on principles that circumvent traditional wizarding limitations." Gnarltooth exchanged glances with Mipsy and Gorby. "Headmaster suggests combined elf magic might affect Horcrux." "It seems worth attempting," Dumbledore confirmed. "Especially given that conventional destruction methods carry significant risk to the destroyer." After extensive discussion of magical theory that left even Hermione struggling to follow all the nuances, a plan emerged. They would adapt the liberation ritual into a focused, unbinding, working directed specifically at the Horcrux. The ritual would require the combined power of 13 elves plus Harry, whose unique magical signature, partially influenced by his own status as an accidental Horcrux, might create a resonance effect against Voldemort's soul fragment. "We should act quickly," Andromeda advised. "The longer we possess the Horcrux, the greater the risk of its dark magic influencing those around it." "Tonight then," Harry decided. "During the waning moon when banishing magic is strongest." As preparations began, Dumbledore drew Harry aside for a private conversation. "There's something you should know before proceeding. The diary I mentioned, the Horcrux I believed had been destroyed, belonged to Lucius Malfoy." Harry's eyes widened. "Malfoy had a Horcrux?" "Knowingly?" "I believe so," Dumbledore confirmed gravely. "Which suggests he and perhaps other former Death Eaters are aware of Voldemort's path to immortality. If they realize we're hunting Horcruxes, they'll move to protect the others," Harry finished. "And possibly accelerate plans to restore Voldemort." "Precisely. Which brings me to another matter entirely, our ministry problem." Harry listened intently as Dumbledore outlined what he'd learned about Operation Restoration, confirming Ron's intelligence that Umbridge was indeed planning to use the Ministry's copy of the Binding Codex to attempt a magical reversion of the elf liberation. "It won't succeed completely," Dumbledore assured Harry, "but it could create dangerous magical backlash and temporarily confuse many newly freed elves about their status. The attempt itself could prove harmful to the collective elf psyche. We need to stop it," Harry said firmly. "When is she planning to act?" "New Year's Eve," Dumbledore replied. "The symbolism appeals to her twisted sense of tradition, restoring the proper order before the new year begins." Harry's mind raced through implications and options. "That's 3 days from now. We need a two-pronged approach: destroy the Horcrux tonight, then develop countermeasures against Umbridge's plan." Dumbledore studied Harry with a mixture of concern and admiration. "You continue to think like a general rather than an 11-year-old, Harry. I find myself simultaneously impressed and troubled by the necessity." Harry met the headmaster's gaze directly. "I stopped being a normal child the night Voldemort killed my parents and left a piece of his soul in my scar. I can either run from that reality or face it head-on." The ritual to destroy the Horcrux began at midnight in the Haven's central clearing. 13 elves, including Dobby, Gnarltooth, Mipsy, and other founding members, formed a circle around a stone altar where the contained locket lay. Harry stood at the north point of the circle, channeling his unique magical connection. Unlike the liberation ritual, which had felt triumphant and expansive, this working carried a grimmer, more focused energy. The elves began a low, harmonic chant in ancient Elvish, words that described the natural order of soul and magic, the abomination of splitting what should remain whole, and the banishment of dark fragments to the void between realms. Harry felt the magic building around them, condensing like pressure before a storm. His scar began to burn, responding to the proximity of another Horcrux as the protective container was gradually opened. The locket itself seemed to sense the danger, vibrating violently on the altar stone. "Now, Harry Potter." Gnarltooth called over the rising magical wind. "Direct your intent through the connection." Harry extended his hands toward the locket, focusing his will as Gnarltooth had taught him years ago. Rather than fighting the pain in his scar, he used it, following the connection back to its source and envisioning it as a channel through which the combined elven magic could flow. The locket suddenly burst open, and a shadowy form rose from within, a young, handsome version of Tom Riddle with cruel eyes that fixed immediately on Harry. "Harry Potter," the apparition sneered, its voice somehow cutting through the magical maelstrom. "The orphan playing at Revolution. Do you really believe these creatures care for you? They use you as a figurehead, a human shield for their rebellion. Without your fame, you are nothing." Harry maintained his concentration, recognizing the psychological attack for what it was. The Shadow Riddle turned to Dobby next. And you, the elf who stole Lucius Malfoy's property. You think yourself a guardian? A revolutionary? You're a servant who's forgotten his place. You'll never be his equal. When he realizes this, he'll discard you like the tool you are. Dobby's voice wavered slightly in the chant, but his hands remained steady in the ritual positions. The apparition continued its psychological assault, targeting each participant's deepest insecurities with uncanny precision. The magical pressure built to nearly unbearable levels as the Horcrux fought for survival. Complete the banishing. Gnarltooth shouted over the cacophony of magic and Riddle's increasingly desperate taunts. The elves' chant reached its crescendo as Harry pushed every ounce of his will through the connection. A blinding flash erupted from the locket, accompanied by an unearthly scream that seemed to exist more in their minds than in physical space. The shadow riddle contorted, its form stretching and tearing before imploding into nothingness. Harry collapsed to his knees, drained beyond exhaustion. The locket on the altar was now just an empty, scorched shell, the malevolent presence completely erased. Around the circle, several elves had also fallen, the magical expenditure overwhelming even their considerable strength. Dobby staggered to Harry's side, his own energy depleted but his eyes shining with fierce triumph. Harry Potter did it. We did it. Soul fragment is destroyed. One down, Harry murmured wearily. But how many more to go? Dumbledore, who had observed the ritual from outside the circle, approached with evident amazement. That was extraordinary magic. Different from how I destroyed the ring, yet equally effective. He examined the empty locket carefully. The soul fragment is indeed gone. You've struck a significant blow against Voldemort tonight. As the participants recovered from the ritual, discussion turned immediately to their next challenge, stopping Umbridge's planned countermeasure against the elf liberation. Direct confrontation at the Ministry would be disastrous, Andromeda cautioned during the strategy session that followed. It would play directly into their narrative of dangerous, rebellious magical creatures threatening wizard authority. What about a magical countermeasure of our own? Suggested Hermione, who had spent hours researching the original binding Codex. If we understand how they're planning to use the Codex, we might be able to neutralize or redirect the magic. Risky without knowing exact parameters of their ritual, Gnarltooth observed. Could cause unpredictable magical interactions. We need more information, Harry decided. Specifically, we need to know where in the Ministry they're planning to perform the ritual, exactly who's involved, and the precise modifications they've made to the original Codex text. I might be able to help with that, said a new voice from the entrance to the council chamber. All heads turned to see Percy Weasley standing awkwardly in the doorway, looking simultaneously nervous and determined. Ron jumped up in surprise. Percy! What are you doing here? The older Weasley adjusted his glasses with a slightly trembling hand. I've been interning in the minister's office over the holiday. I've seen things, documents, meetings, about this Operation Restoration. I didn't fully understand what it meant until I overheard Ron talking to Fred and George about coming here to warn Harry. Harry studied Percy with cautious hope. The prefect's rigid adherence to rules and authority was well known at Hogwarts. That he would risk his precious ministry career to bring information spoke volumes. What exactly have you seen, Percy? Harry asked. Enough to know they're planning something unconscionable, Percy replied, his usual pomposity giving way to genuine moral outrage. Umbridge has been working with unspeakables in a sealed chamber on level 9. They've modified the binding codex to create what they're calling a restoration wave that will magically override the elves' perceived confusion about their status. Perceived confusion, Dobby repeated with unusual bitterness. They cannot accept that elves choose freedom with clear minds. Percy nodded uncomfortably. The ritual requires 13 ministry officials positioned at key magical junctures throughout the building. Umbridge will lead the central working in the Department of Mysteries precisely at midnight on New Year's Eve. This detailed intelligence transformed their strategic options. Over the next hours, a bold plan emerged, not to prevent the ritual entirely, which would require a direct assault on the Ministry, but to subvert it from within through precision magical intervention. If we can't stop them from casting, Harry reasoned, we redirect what they cast. Turn their own magic against their purpose. The plan required perfect timing, extraordinary coordination, and considerable risk. While Ministry officials gathered to perform Umbridge's ritual, a small team including Harry, Dobby, and 2 other elves with specialized magical abilities would infiltrate the Department of Mysteries. Meanwhile, at the Haven, Gnarltooth would lead a simultaneous counter-ritual designed not to block the Ministry magic but to invert its intention, transforming a spell meant to restore binding into one that would actually strengthen elf autonomy. The magical principle of reversal, Gnarltooth explained. Like a mirror reflecting light back to its source, but with the image inverted. Extremely difficult, requires precise magical alignment. And if it fails? Andromeda asked the question everyone was thinking. Gnarltooth didn't sugarcoat the answer. Magical backlash of unpredictable intensity. Potentially harmful to all elves connected to either ritual. Dobby straightened, his expression resolute. Risk worth taking. Better magical backlash than return to slavery. The council debated furiously, with some arguing that the risk was too great and others insisting they had no choice but to act. Eventually, Harry called for a formal vote, the first time in the Haven's history that such a measure had been necessary. The result, 17 in favor of the plan, 5 opposed, 3 abstentions. Then it's decided, Harry declared. We move forward with Operation Reversal. The remaining days before New Year's Eve passed in a blur of preparation. Percy, having committed fully to their cause, returned to the Ministry with instructions to observe but not interfere with Umbridge's preparations. Hermione led a research team working around the clock to refine their understanding of the magical principles involved. Gnarltooth trained the ritual participants in the complex magical geometries required for the counterworking. Harry, meanwhile, faced a personal decision that had been troubling him since the Horcrux destruction. I need to tell Ron, Hermione, and the others the truth, he told Dobby during a rare quiet moment. About being a Horcrux myself. Dobby's ears drooped with concern. Is Harry Potter sure? Truth is heavy burden for friends to carry. They're risking everything to help us, Harry replied. They deserve to know what they're really fighting for, and against. Besides, if something goes wrong during the Ministry operation. He left the sentence unfinished, but Dobby understood. If the worst happened, Harry's friends needed to know about the Horcrux connection to continue the fight against Voldemort's return. That evening, Harry gathered his closest Hogwarts allies, Ron, Hermione, Neville, and surprisingly, the Weasley twins, who had arrived with supplies and offered their considerable talents for creative chaos. In the privacy of his cottage, Harry revealed the complete truth about his scar, the prophecy, and his status as an unwitting Horcrux. The stunned silence that followed his explanation was broken by Fred, or possibly George, Weasley. So you've got a bit of you-know-who stuck in your head, and you've been fighting for elf rights, destroying dark artifacts, and revolutionizing magical society anyway? The redhead whistled. That's bloody impressive, mate. Language, Fred, Hermione admonished automatically, before turning to Harry with tears in her eyes. Oh, Harry. To carry that knowledge all this time. Actually, I only found out recently, Harry clarified. Dumbledore told me at Hogwarts, and that's part of why destroying the locket was so important. It proves Horcruxes can be destroyed without harming their containers. So you can be freed from it too, Neville said quietly, showing his characteristic insight. Ron, who had been uncharacteristically silent, finally spoke. Does it ever affect you? His soul bit, I mean. Can he control you or anything? Harry shook his head. Not control, no. But I think it's why I can speak Parseltongue. And sometimes I get flashes, impressions of his emotions when they're particularly strong. That could be useful tactically, Hermione noted, ever practical even through her distress. Early warning system for his activities. The conversation continued late into the night, their bonds of friendship and shared purpose growing stronger through the weight of shared knowledge. By morning, they had integrated this new understanding into their planning for Operation Reversal. New Year's Eve arrived with tense anticipation. Final communications confirmed that Umbridge's preparations were proceeding exactly as Percy had reported. 13 ministry officials, all carefully selected for their anti-creature prejudices, had been positioned throughout the ministry building. The modified binding codex had been placed on a specially constructed altar in a sealed chamber within the Department of Mysteries. At the Haven, Gnarltooth and his team of ritual specialists made their final preparations for the counterworking. The timing would be critical, they needed to begin their ritual precisely 3 minutes before the ministries, allowing their magical field to establish before Umbridge's team activated the codex. Harry's infiltration team gathered for final instructions. Besides Dobby, he would be accompanied by Flipsy, an elf with exceptional abilities in magical concealment, and Grimald, whose talent for magical disruption had proven invaluable during previous operations. They would enter the ministry through a service entrance identified by Percy, using a combination of elf apparition and concealment magic to avoid detection. Remember, Harry emphasized to his team, our goal isn't to stop their ritual but to modify it at the crucial moment. Timing is everything. As dusk fell, the Haven held a brief ceremony for all participants in the operation, a tradition before dangerous missions. Mipsy distributed protective amulets to each team member, while Gorby led a solemn invocation for success and safety. When it was time to depart, Dobby took Harry's hand. The young wizard felt the familiar sensation of elf apparition, different from wizard teleportation, more like slipping between spaces than being compressed through them. They materialized in a narrow maintenance corridor deep within the Ministry of Magic. The building was largely deserted on the holiday evening, with only security personnel and Umbridge's team present. Flipsy immediately cast elf concealment magic over the group, rendering them undetectable to most wizard security measures. This way, Harry whispered, consulting the map Percy had provided. Department of Mysteries is 2 levels down. They moved silently through the deserted corridors, freezing occasionally when security wizards passed nearby. The magical concealment held, though Harry noticed it wavered slightly near certain powerful detection charms. Ministry has increased security since operation planning began, Flipsy murmured. New charms, stronger than usual. Can we still get through? Harry asked. Flipsy nodded, though his expression remained concerned. Yes, but leaves magical trace. They might detect disturbance after we pass. This complication meant they needed to move faster than planned. If security detected their presence too soon, the entire operation could be compromised. They reached the entrance to the Department of Mysteries without incident, a plain black door at the end of a corridor. According to Percy's intelligence, Umbridge's ritual chamber lay beyond, through a complex maze of rotating rooms designed to confuse unauthorized visitors. Dobby, can you sense where they've placed the Codex? Harry asked. The elf closed his eyes, extending his magical awareness. Yes, powerful dark magic mixed with binding signatures. 3 rooms away, straight path but hidden entrances. Grimald examined the door with professional interest. Heavy protection charms, but designed against wizard intrusion. Elf magic approaches differently. He placed his gnarled hand against the surface, murmuring words in ancient Elvish. The door shimmered slightly before swinging open silently. Beyond lay the circular room Percy had described, black walls with identical doors, designed to disorient intruders. Before the room could begin its defensive rotation, Dobby pointed confidently to the 3rd door from their entrance. That one leads toward Ritual Chamber. They moved quickly through the indicated door, finding themselves in a long rectangular room filled with glittering time-related artifacts, clocks of every description, hourglasses, and what Harry recognized as time-turners in sealed cases. At the far end, another door led deeper into the department. 11 minutes until ritual begins, Grimald warned, consulting a magical timepiece keyed to their operation schedule. Haven counter-ritual starts in 8 minutes. They hurried across the time room and through the next door, entering a vast chamber that took Harry's breath away, a replica of the night sky spreading above them, planets and stars moving in slow, stately patterns across the magical ceiling. In the center of the room stood a raised platform surrounded by 13 smaller pedestals arranged in a perfect circle. And there was the Codex, an ancient tome nearly identical to the one Harry had used for the liberation ritual, open to pages covered in elaborate magical formulae and binding runes. Umbridge herself stood beside it, dressed in ceremonial robes of shocking pink, directing last-minute preparations with her characteristic saccharine authority. The containment field must be perfect, she was instructing a nervous-looking unspeakable. We can't risk magical leakage alerting the creatures before the binding takes effect. Harry felt Dobby tense beside him. They retreated slightly into the shadow of a large model of Jupiter, observing the preparations while remaining under Flipsy's concealment. They've modified the central binding formula, Dobby whispered, his keen eyes examining the Codex from afar. Added compulsion elements not in original text. Meaning? Harry asked. More than just restoring binding, forcing elves to forget freedom was ever possible. Very dark magic. Harry's determination hardened. We definitely need to stop this. Positions everyone, exactly as we planned. The team split up, each moving to predetermined locations around the ritual chamber. Harry would remain hidden near the main entrance, ready to create a distraction at the crucial moment. Dobby positioned himself directly behind the raised platform, invisible to the participants but within magical interference range of the Codex itself. Flipsy and Grimald took positions at opposite sides of the room, preparing to disrupt the magical flow at Harry's signal. Ministry officials began filing in, taking positions at the 13 pedestals. Harry recognized several faces, department heads, Wizengamot members, and pure-blood traditionalists. Last to enter was Lucius Malfoy, his aristocratic features set in smug satisfaction as he took the position directly opposite Umbridge. 2 minutes to midnight, Umbridge announced. Begin preliminary attunement. The officials raised their wands, beginning to chant in archaic Latin, words that made Harry's skin crawl with their emphasis on dominance and subjugation. The air in the chamber grew heavy with gathering magic. Harry checked his timepiece. The Haven's counter-ritual should be starting now. He closed his eyes briefly, reaching out with his magical senses as Gnarltooth had taught him. Far away, he could feel the faintest resonance of the opposing working beginning to form, hundreds of free elves combining their magic to create a protective field around their autonomy. 1 minute, Umbridge declared, her voice rising with anticipation. Positions finalized. Harry caught Dobby's eye across the chamber and nodded slightly. It was almost time. 30 seconds. Primary containment field engaged. A shimmering dome of magic became visible, encapsulating the entire ritual area, designed to prevent outside interference. But they were already inside, and Umbridge had not accounted for elf magic operating on different principles than wizard spellwork. 10 seconds. Prepare for Codex activation. Harry raised his hand, counting down with his fingers. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, he whispered. As Umbridge touched her wand to the Codex and began the activation incantation, 3 things happened simultaneously. First, Grimald released a pulse of disruptive elf magic that caused the containment field to fluctuate wildly, distracting several participants. Second, Flipsy created what appeared to be a breach in the chamber's security, alarms blaring from the direction opposite Harry's position, drawing attention away from the Codex itself. Third and most crucial, Dobby slipped beneath the central platform and placed his hands directly on the underside of the altar, channeling his magic into the stone itself. What's happening? Umbridge shrieked as alarms wailed and magical instruments around the room began malfunctioning. Maintain the ritual. Don't break the circle. But the disruption had served its purpose, creating just enough confusion for Dobby to implement the critical modification. As Umbridge continued the activation incantation, Dobby whispered counterwords in ancient Elvish, his magic flowing into the Codex through the altar. Harry felt the moment the 2 rituals, the Haven's distant counterworking and the Ministry's activation, collided in magical space. The resulting surge made every magical object in the room vibrate with power. Umbridge, unaware of the interference, completed the final words of the activation with triumphant venom, and by ancient right and magical law, restore all house elves to their proper binding and service. The Codex erupted with blinding light, magic pouring outward in a visible wave that expanded through the containment field and beyond, exactly as Umbridge had intended. What she didn't realize was that Dobby's interference, combined with the Haven's counter-ritual, had fundamentally altered the magic's purpose while maintaining its form. Instead of reinforcing binding, the wave was carrying a very different magical instruction to every elf it touched: conscious choice. Umbridge's expression shifted from triumph to confusion as magical feedback began flowing back into the ritual chamber, not the expected confirmation of restored binding, but something altogether different. "Something's wrong," Lucius Malfoy declared, his aristocratic features contorting with effort as he tried to maintain his position in the ritual. "The magic isn't settling properly." "Impossible," Umbridge insisted. "The Codex is infallible when properly activated." But the magical backlash continued building. Around the circle, several participants began showing signs of strain as the working demanded more power than anticipated. The magic had become a tug-of-war between their intention and the counter-intention imposed by Dobby's modification and the Haven's distant working. Harry, monitoring the magical currents as Gnarltooth had taught him, realized they had succeeded, but at a potentially catastrophic cost. The opposing magical forces were creating instability that threatened to collapse into something destructive. "Dobby," he called, dropping the concealment charm as the situation grew critical. "We need to stabilize the magic." Umbridge's eyes bulged with outrage as Harry Potter materialized in her supposedly secure ritual chamber. "You! Guards! Intruder in the Department of Mysteries!" But the immediate magical crisis took precedence over security concerns. The ritual was spiraling out of control, wild magic lashing out in visible arcs of energy that cracked stone and shattered magical instruments throughout the chamber. "Everyone down!" Harry shouted as a particularly violent surge blasted one of the pedestals to rubble, sending its occupant flying. "The ritual is collapsing." Lucius Malfoy, showing surprising magical acuity, attempted to withdraw from the circle in a controlled manner. "Shut it down, Umbridge. The magical feedback is too strong." "No," the toad-like witch shrieked, her face contorted with fanatical determination. "I will not be thwarted by Potter and his creature friends. Increase power to the containment field." Her order, born of magical ignorance, proved catastrophic. Increasing power to the already strained containment only accelerated the feedback loop. The chamber began to shake as magical forces tore at the fabric of the department's protective enchantments. Harry fought his way toward the central platform where Dobby was attempting to moderate the chaotic energies flowing through the Codex. "We need to ground the excess magic before it explodes." "How?" Dobby shouted over the magical maelstrom. Harry's mind raced through everything Gnarltooth had taught him about magical theory. The planetary models, they're made of celestial metals that can channel magic. If we redirect the energy through them into the earth beneath the Ministry. Understanding immediately, Dobby signaled to Flipsy and Grimble. The three elves positioned themselves at key points around the chamber, extending their hands toward the elaborate astronomical models suspended from the ceiling. Harry placed himself directly before the Codex, facing a panicked Umbridge across the altar. "Move aside," he ordered her. "We're trying to prevent a magical catastrophe." "I will not be ordered by a child." Umbridge spat, raising her wand. "This is your doing, Potter." "Stupefy." Harry ducked the stunning spell, which struck the Codex instead, with immediate and dramatic consequences. The already unstable magic reacted violently to the direct attack, sending a shockwave through the chamber that knocked everyone off their feet. In the moment of chaos, Harry lunged forward and grabbed the Codex itself. Pain seared through his hands as the conflicting magics coursed through him, but he held firm, turning to face the largest model, a representation of Earth suspended at the chamber's center. Now, Dobby, he shouted. Channel through me. The elves, understanding his intention, directed the wild magic flowing through the room toward Harry and the codex he held. Harry felt himself becoming a living conduit for more magical energy than he'd ever experienced, a lightning rod for forces that threatened to tear him apart from within. With a final desperate effort, he thrust the codex toward the Earth model, creating a direct channel for the destructive energies to flow into the grounding metals and down into the earth beneath the ministry itself. The resulting discharge lit up the chamber like a supernova. Harry felt rather than hurt himself screaming as magic poured through him, not just the ritual energies but something deeper and more personal. The Horcrux within his scar resonated painfully with the chaotic magic, creating an unexpected connection to the grounding process. For one eternal moment, Harry experienced dual awareness, his own consciousness and a distant, rage-filled presence that he recognized immediately as Voldemort. The Dark Wizard, wherever his wraith-like form currently existed, had felt the destruction of the locket Horcrux and now sensed the magical disturbance affecting another piece of his soul. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the connection severed. The magical storm subsided, leaving the ritual chamber in ruins, models crashed to the floor, pedestals cracked, and the participants scattered in varying states of injury and magical exhaustion. Harry collapsed to his knees, the codex falling from his blistered hands. Dobby was at his side instantly, supporting him as the chamber filled with security personnel responding to the magical catastrophe. Did it work? Harry gasped, his vision blurring from exhaustion. Dobby nodded, his expression mixing concern for Harry with satisfaction at their accomplishment. Yes. Haven reports ritual completed successfully. Umbridge spell completely reversed, instead of reinforcing binding, it strengthened choice for all elves it touched. Arrest them. Umbridge shrieked, struggling to her feet with her once immaculate robes in tatters. Potter and these creatures have attacked the ministry. This is insurrection. But before the Aurors could respond, a new voice cut through the chaos, calm, authoritative, and carrying unmistakable power. I think not, Madam Umbridge. Albus Dumbledore stood in the doorway, accompanied by Amelia Bones and, surprisingly, Minister Fudge himself. What we have witnessed appears to be unauthorized experimental magic that young Mr. Potter heroically helped contain before it could cause greater damage. Fudge looked around the destroyed chamber with evident shock. Dolores, what in Merlin's name have you done? Unauthorized ritual magic in the Department of Mysteries? With a restricted artifact. Minister, I can explain, Umbridge blustered, her voice losing its girlish quality in her panic. It was an authorized security operation to address the house elf situation, which neither the minister nor the Wisengamot approved, Amelia Bones interjected coldly. I've reviewed all authorized operations personally, Dolores. This wasn't among them. Harry, still supported by Dobby, watched the political tide turning with weary satisfaction. Umbridge's unauthorized operation, now spectacularly failed, was rapidly becoming a liability that Fudge clearly wanted to distance himself from. We'll need full statements from everyone involved, Bones continued, signaling to her Aurors. Secure the chamber and all participants for questioning. And get medical attention for Mr. Potter immediately, he appears to have sustained injuries while preventing this disaster from escalating. As ministry personnel moved to follow these orders, Harry found himself face to face with Lucius Malfoy, who had managed to regain his composure despite the circumstances. The aristocrat's cold eyes bored into Harry with calculated hatred. Impressive display, Potter, he said softly, ensuring only Harry could hear. But you've made enemies tonight who won't forget. The Dark Lord has allies in places you haven't begun to imagine. I know about the diary, Malfoy, Harry replied equally quietly, satisfaction flowing through him as he saw the momentary flicker of shock in the man's pale eyes. And now we have this codex too. Your master's secrets aren't as safe as you think. Before Malfoy could respond, he was escorted away by Aurors for questioning. Dumbledore approached Harry, concern evident in his ancient features. That was extraordinarily dangerous magic, Harry. Far beyond what anyone your age should attempt. We didn't have a choice, Harry replied, wincing as a healer began treating his magically burned hands. Umbridge's ritual would have caused psychological damage to hundreds of free elves. I don't dispute your motivation, Dumbledore said gently. Merely observe that the personal cost might have been higher than you realize. Channeling that much conflicting magic through your body, especially given your unique condition, could have had unpredictable consequences. Harry nodded tiredly, understanding the reference to his Horcrux status. I felt him, Professor. Just for a moment. He knows something's happening to his Horcruxes. Dumbledore's expression grew grave. Then we must accelerate our efforts to find the others. But first, you need rest and recovery. The aftermath of what quickly became known as the New Year's magical incident unfolded rapidly over the following days. The Ministry, eager to contain the political fallout, officially classified the event as an unauthorized experimental procedure that experienced catastrophic magical feedback. Umbridge was suspended pending investigation, while participating officials received varying administrative sanctions. More significantly, the Magical Beings' Rights Act gained surprising momentum in the January Wisengamot session. The contrast between the liberation movement's public, transparent advocacy and Umbridge's secretive, destructive countermeasure shifted public opinion dramatically. Within weeks, the core provisions of the Act passed with unexpected support, establishing basic legal personhood for elves and other magical beings, though many implementation details remained to be negotiated. At the Haven, the community celebrated this legislative victory while adapting to new magical realities. The combined effect of the liberation ritual, the Horcrux destruction, and the reversed ministry working had created what Gnarltooth called a cascade of magical evolution throughout elf society. Free elves reported stronger, more versatile magic, while even those who chose to remain in service experienced a fundamental shift in their magical nature, their power now flowing from conscious choice rather than compelled obedience. For Harry, the return to Hogwarts for spring term brought new challenges and opportunities. His role in the New Year's incident, though officially minimized by the Ministry, elevated his status from curiosity to legend among the student body. Many who had been skeptical of his elf rights advocacy now viewed him with newfound respect or fear, depending on their political leanings. You're different since the Ministry, Hermione observed during their first week back, studying Harry with her characteristic perceptiveness. Not just the public recognition, something about your magic feels changed. Harry nodded, having noticed the same thing. Gnarltooth says channeling that much raw power fundamentally altered my magical signature. And he lowered his voice, ensuring they wouldn't be overheard. The connection to the Horcrux in my scar feels different too. Less intrusive somehow, as if the magical discharge partially insulated it from my core magic. That could be tremendously important, Hermione replied thoughtfully. It suggests there might be ways to weaken the Horcrux connection without destroying it outright. This possibility became central to their research efforts that term. While maintaining their public focus on elf rights implementation and interhouse cooperation at Hogwarts, Harry's core group, now expanded to include trusted allies from all four houses, continued private investigations into Horcruxes, Voldemort's potential return, and the prophecy connecting him to Harry. Dumbledore, recognizing the value of Harry's unique perspective and abilities, began providing more direct mentorship. Their weekly meetings covered advanced magical theory, detailed information about Voldemort's history, and collaborative planning for locating remaining Horcruxes. I believe I've identified another likely candidate, Dumbledore shared during one such session in late February. Voldemort was obsessed with Hogwarts founders' artifacts. The locket belonged to Slytherin. It follows that he would seek items connected to the other founders as well. Ravenclaw's diadem, Harry suggested, recalling historical information from Hermione's research. Hufflepuff's cup. And something of Gryffindor's, though the only known relic is the sword, which you control. Dumbledore nodded approvingly. Precisely my thinking. The cup is our next target. I've traced a potential connection to the Lestrange family vault at Gringotts. That's practically inaccessible, Harry noted. Even with goblin relations improving through the Magical Beings Act, they wouldn't violate vault security. Perhaps not for a mere request, Dumbledore agreed. But for a matter involving dangerous dark magic that threatens goblin interests as well, we may find more flexibility than expected. These strategic discussions paralleled Harry's continued work with the Haven Council, now formally recognized by the Ministry as the Elven Autonomous Coalition. The political landscape continued evolving as magical society adjusted to the new reality of elf freedom and legal personhood. Not all responses were positive. A reactionary movement calling itself the Magical Heritage Protection Front emerged among traditionalist pure-blood families, advocating for the repeal of the Magical Beings Act and a return to natural magical order. Though ostensibly legal in their activities, intelligence gathered by the Haven's network suggested connections to former Death Eaters and concerning interest in dark magic associated with Voldemort's rise. By early spring, these tensions escalated into occasional violence. A free elf employment office in Diagon Alley was vandalized with threatening messages. A wizard family known for employing free elves at fair wages had their home attacked with dark curses. Most disturbingly, 2 elves disappeared while traveling between magical communities, their fate unknown. The pattern reminded Harry uncomfortably of historical accounts of Voldemort's first rise to power, starting with isolated incidents against marginalized groups before escalating to broader terror. He shared these concerns during an emergency communication with Dobby and the Haven Council. "It's happening faster than we anticipated," Harry explained via the communication mirror. "The opposition is organized and increasingly aggressive. We think former Death Eaters are using the elf rights issue to rebuild their networks while masking their connection to Voldemort." Dobby has noticed same pattern, his guardian confirmed gravely. Shadow movements behind public protests. Dark magic signatures similar to those Dobby remembers from Malfoy Manor during First War. "We need to accelerate our preparations," Harry decided. "Both for finding remaining Horcruxes and for community defense. The next attack could target the Haven directly." This prediction proved grimly accurate sooner than anyone expected. 3 nights later, as Harry slept in Gryffindor Tower, he awakened to searing pain in his scar and a vision more vivid than any he'd experienced before, the Haven under attack by masked figures in dark robes, magical fire spreading through the settlement as defenders fought desperately against overwhelming numbers. Harry jolted upright, gasping for breath, the connection still vibrant in his mind. This wasn't a dream or memory, it was happening now. He activated his communication mirror instantly, but received no response. The connection to the Haven appeared blocked. Without hesitation, Harry threw on clothes and raced from the dormitory, heading directly for Dumbledore's office. He found the headmaster already awake, seemingly expecting him. "The Haven is under attack," Harry said without preamble. "Death Eaters. I saw it through the connection." Dumbledore nodded grimly. "The wards I helped establish there triggered an alert moments ago. I've already contacted the Order of the Phoenix. We depart immediately." "I'm coming with you," Harry stated flatly. "Harry, they're my family," Harry interrupted with quiet intensity. "And this attack is happening because of me, because of what I represent and what I've helped build. I won't hide at Hogwarts while they fight." Dumbledore studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Very well. But you stay with me at all times and follow instructions without question. Your safety remains paramount, not just for personal reasons but for the greater conflict ahead." Minutes later, they apparat to a position near the Haven's boundaries, accompanied by several Order members including McGonagall, Snape, and a young Auror Dumbledore introduced as Nymphadora Tonks, Andromeda's daughter and a metamorphmagus. The scene that greeted them confirmed Harry's worst fears. Magical fire with the distinctive serpentine characteristics of fiendfire ravaged several structures near the settlement's edge. Flashes of spell-light illuminated combatants throughout the area, at least 20 masked attackers exchanging curses with Haven defenders. The elf magic protecting the settlement's boundaries had clearly been breached by dark magical means. "Death Eaters," Tonks confirmed grimly, studying the attackers' movements. "Definitely trained fighters using coordinated assault patterns. Why now?" McGonagall wondered as they moved swiftly toward the conflict. What triggered this escalation? The Horcrux, Harry realized with sudden clarity. Destroying the locket and interfering with Umbridge's ritual, Voldemort is responding to threats against his path to immortality, even in his weakened state. Acting through his remaining loyal followers, Dumbledore agreed. Severus, what have you heard from your contacts? Snape's expression remained inscrutable. Nothing specific about this attack. Which suggests it was planned by an inner circle I don't have access to. They reached the battlefield's edge just as a group of defenders led by Gorby and several warrior elves drove back attackers from a defensive position near the council building. Harry spotted Dobby organizing evacuations, directing younger elves and non-combatants toward a protected area. Harry Potter! Dobby exclaimed when he spotted their arrival. Death Eaters breached outer wards 20 minutes ago. Came through weakness in northeast boundary, seemed to know exactly where to strike. They had inside information, Harry concluded grimly. Someone who'd been here before. Questions of intelligence failure must wait, Dumbledore interjected. Minerva, reinforce the evacuation protections. Nymphadora, coordinate with the elf security team on the western flank. Severus, with me, will address the fiend fire before it consumes the entire settlement. As the Order members moved to their assignments, Harry stayed with Dobby, helping organize the defense of the central area where most non-combatants had gathered. Despite his youth, Harry's unique magical training made him a valuable fighter, combining wizard spellwork with elf-taught techniques that many Death Eaters clearly hadn't anticipated. The battle intensified as both sides committed fully to the conflict. The Death Eaters, realizing Order members had joined the defense, escalated their assault with increasingly dark magic. Curses that Harry recognized from defense books as borderline illegal or worse filled the air, cutting hexes, bone breakers, and in several cases, the sickly green light of killing curses. They're not just trying to intimidate, Harry observed grimly as he and Dobby sheltered behind a partially collapsed wall. This is an extermination attempt. Harry Potter is primary target, Dobby replied, his normally gentle eyes hardened with protective fury. Death Eaters called your name several times, offering to withdraw if Haven surrenders you. That's not happening, Harry stated flatly, casting a shield charm to deflect debris from a nearby explosion. We need to turn their focus, draw them into a position where Dumbledore and the others can trap them. As if summoned by this tactical assessment, a massive magical concussion shook the battlefield. Harry peered over their cover to see Dumbledore engaged with what appeared to be the Death Eaters' leader, a tall figure whose exceptional dueling skill and magical power stood out even among the skilled attackers. That's not magical technique I recognize, Dobby observed with concern, watching the leader's distinctive casting style. Harry focused on the duel, something tugging at his memory as he watched the Death Eaters' movements. The way they dodged, the unusual wand flourishes preceding certain spells, it seemed familiar somehow. A horrifying realization struck him. That's not a Death Eater, or not only a Death Eater. Dobby, I think that's Voldemort himself, possessing someone. The intensity of his scar pain suddenly made terrible sense. The weakened wraith form Dumbledore had described wouldn't be capable of full corporeal action, but possession of a willing follower, temporarily housing his consciousness in another's body, might be within his diminished capabilities. Harry Potter must warn Dumbledore. Dobby exclaimed. But Dumbledore, with his extraordinary magical perception, had apparently reached the same conclusion. His duel with the possessed Death Eater escalated to a level of magical combat rarely witnessed in the modern era, elemental forces, transfigured weapons, and magical techniques so advanced they were barely recognizable as spells. The rest of the battlefield seemed to pause as this titanic magical confrontation unfolded. Even other Death Eaters pulled back, clearly unwilling to interfere in their master's duel. Harry used this momentary focus shift to organize a counteroffensive with the Haven defenders. While attention remained on the central duel, Elf-Wizard teams moved to flank the Death Eater positions, cutting off retreat routes and targeting isolated attackers. The tide began to turn as the defenders' superior coordination overcame the attackers' individual power. Several Death Eaters fell to combined elf-wizard magical attacks, while others began operating away as their position deteriorated. In the central duel, Dumbledore finally gained decisive advantage. A complex combination of transfiguration and banishment magic drove the possessed Death Eater to his knees, momentarily overwhelming even Voldemort's considerable power. "It's over, Tom," Dumbledore declared, his wand trained unwaveringly on his opponent. "Your followers are defeated or fled. Surrender this vessel before you damage it beyond repair." A terrible, high-pitched laugh emerged from the Death Eater's throat, a sound Harry recognized from his deepest nightmares. "You think this is defeat, old man? This was merely reconnaissance." The mask fell away, revealing the contorted features of a wizard Harry didn't recognize, though the red gleam in the man's eyes was unmistakably not his own. "You've forestalled my return, but not prevented it," Voldemort continued through his puppet's lips. "Each delay merely gives me time to identify your vulnerabilities. The boy. The elves. Your precious order. I know how to hurt you now. Yet you've learned nothing yourself, Tom," Dumbledore replied calmly. "Still underestimating the power of cooperation between magical beings. Still blind to the strength of those you consider inferior." The possessed Death Eater's face twisted in fury. "Sentiment. Weakness disguised as virtue. It changes nothing." His gaze shifted, finding Harry across the battlefield with unnerving precision. "Enjoy your small victories, Potter. When next we meet, I will be whole again, and you will watch everything you've built crumble before you die." Before anyone could react, the possessed body convulsed violently. A shadow-like essence erupted from the wizard's mouth and eyes, hovering briefly like a malevolent mist before dissipating into the night. The abandoned body collapsed, the Death Eater, now himself again, gasping in evident agony from the possession's aftermath. Aurors began operating onto the scene as Ministry response finally activated. The remaining Death Eaters were quickly captured or fled, leaving the defenders to assess the damage and tend to the wounded. The Haven had survived, though at significant cost. 3 elves and 1 wizard ally had been killed in the attack. Dozens more suffered injuries of varying severity. Nearly a third of the settlement structures lay damaged or destroyed, including the original council building. As dawn broke over the devastated community, Harry stood with Dobby, surveying the damage from a small rise that had once offered a peaceful view of the thriving settlement. "He'll be back," Harry said quietly. "Stronger next time." Dobby nodded, his expression solemn but resolved. "And we will be stronger too, Harry Potter. Tonight proved elves and wizards fighting together can defeat even Death Eaters. But at what cost?" Harry gestured to the destruction around them. "We built something beautiful here, Dobby. A model for how things could be. And in one night. Buildings can be rebuilt," Dobby reminded him gently. "Ideas cannot be so easily destroyed. The Haven is more than structures, it is change that has already begun throughout magical world." Dumbledore approached them, looking weary but determined after coordinating with Ministry officials to secure the area. "The Minister is calling this an isolated terrorist incident," he informed them. "Politically expedient, but dangerously misleading." This was Voldemort announcing his imminent return to power. "We need to find the remaining Horcruxes," Harry stated firmly. "Before he regains full strength." Dumbledore nodded. "Indeed. But we must also prepare for broader conflict." Tonight's attack demonstrated that Voldemort views the elf liberation movement as a direct threat to his power base, disrupting traditional hierarchies he exploited during his first rise. "Makes Haven primary target," Dobby concluded. "We must strengthen defenses, create multiple secure locations instead of one central settlement. And accelerate political reforms," Harry added. "The more rights and protections we can lock into magical law before Voldemort returns in full, the harder it will be for him to simply reverse everything when he seizes power." "A sound strategy," Dumbledore agreed. "Fighting on multiple fronts, magical, political, and social. Though I must insist that your personal safety takes precedence," Harry. You remain central to both the prophecy and Voldemort's obsession. Harry met the headmaster's concerned gaze with quiet determination. I understand my role, Professor. But I won't hide while others fight my battles. That's not who I am, and it's not how we'll win this war. Over the following weeks, the Haven community demonstrated remarkable resilience. Reconstruction began immediately, with architectural improvements that incorporated enhanced defensive features. The governance structure evolved to meet new security realities, with Dobby elected as formal leader of a reorganized council that now included both elf and wizard representatives. At Hogwarts, Harry's dual focus on academics and strategic planning intensified. His core group of allies expanded to include students from all houses who rejected pureblood supremacist ideology and supported magical being rights. Even some children of traditionally conservative families, impressed by Harry's magical abilities and leadership during the Ministry incident, began questioning their parents' political positions. Most significantly, the attack accelerated Dumbledore's Horcrux investigations. By early summer, they had confirmed the location of Hufflepuff's cup in the Lestrange vault at Gringotts. Diplomatic negotiations with the Goblin Nation, greatly facilitated by the improved relations resulting from the Magical Beings Act, led to an unprecedented agreement allowing a team of cursebreakers to examine the Vault 4 dangerous dark artifacts that threaten Goblin security. The recovery and destruction of this Horcrux, using a refined version of the ritual that had cleansed the locket, dealt another blow to Voldemort's immortality strategy. Though the Dark Wizard remained active through his followers, each Horcrux destruction weakened his spiritual cohesion and delayed his full corporeal return. As the school year drew to a close, Harry met with Dumbledore for a final strategic assessment before returning to the Haven for summer. 3 Horcruxes confirmed destroyed, Dumbledore summarized. The ring, the locket, and now the cup. I believe the diary was also a Horcrux, destroyed before we began our hunt. That leaves potentially 2 more, plus the fragment in your scar. Ravenclaw's diadem and Nagini, his snake, Harry suggested, based on their previous discussions. The first hidden at Hogwarts, the second kept close to him at all times. A sound assessment, Dumbledore nodded approvingly. We'll begin a systematic search of the castle next term. As for Nagini, she'll only become accessible once Voldemort achieves corporeal form again. Harry leaned forward intently. And my scar? Have you found any method to remove the Horcrux without? He hesitated. Fatal consequences. Dumbledore's ancient eyes reflected complex emotions. I have several promising avenues of research, Harry. The magical discharge during the Ministry incident provided valuable insights into how your core magic interacts with the foreign soul fragment. I believe a solution exists, though it may require magic we don't yet fully understand. Harry nodded, accepting this partial reassurance. And the broader situation? The political landscape? Polarizing, Dumbledore admitted. The Magical Beings Act has transformed society more rapidly than even I anticipated. Many embrace the changes, seeing improved relations with elves, goblins, and other magical beings as strengthening our community. Others perceive threat to their privilege and power. The middle ground shrinks daily. Setting the stage for open conflict when Voldemort returns, Harry concluded grimly. Yes, though your work has significantly improved our position compared to his first rise, Dumbledore noted. Last time, Voldemort exploited divisions between magical beings, turning some against wizards while subjugating others. Your liberation movement has created unprecedented cooperation and mutual respect. Not enough yet, Harry responded. There's still so much prejudice, so many who would return to the old ways if given the chance. Dumbledore smiled slightly. You've accomplished more in 1 year than most achieve in a lifetime, Harry. The path to lasting change is always longer than we hope, but you've ensured it can no longer be simply erased. As Harry prepared to leave Hogwarts the following day, he found himself reflecting on the extraordinary year that had transformed both himself and the wizarding world. What had begun as a simple wish for elf freedom had evolved into a multifaceted revolution challenging centuries of prejudice and exploitation. The costs had been significant, lives lost, communities damaged, and the innocence of childhood sacrificed to leadership responsibilities beyond his years. Yet the achievements were undeniable: hundreds of elves living in freedom, unprecedented cooperation between magical beings, 3 Horcruxes destroyed, and the foundations laid for continued resistance against Voldemort's return. On the platform at Hogsmeade Station, Harry's friends gathered to say temporary goodbyes before summer separation. Hermione would be visiting the Haven for several weeks to continue research projects. Ron had invited Harry to the Burrow for the Quidditch World Cup in August. Neville planned to introduce his formidable grandmother to the Elf Council to strengthen political alliances. It won't be a peaceful summer, Hermione predicted as they shared final conversations. The opposition will keep testing boundaries, looking for vulnerabilities. Let them try, Ron replied with newfound confidence. We're ready this time. Not just Harry, all of us. Harry smiled at his friend's determination. That's what makes this different from Voldemort's first rise. He expects to face me and Dumbledore. He doesn't understand he'll be facing an entire movement of elves, wizards, and other magical beings united against everything he represents. As the train departed for London carrying his friends, Harry joined Dobby at the apparition point for their return to the Haven. The settlement had been substantially rebuilt since the Death Eater attack, its new architecture incorporating both improved defenses and symbolic representations of elf-wizard cooperation. Ready to go home, Harry Potter? Dobby asked, extending his hand. Harry took it firmly, feeling the connection that had sustained him since that first night when a house elf had answered a neglected child's plea for rescue. Home, he agreed. To keep building what they can never destroy. They vanished with a soft crack, leaving behind the sheltered grounds of Hogwarts for the uncertain battleground of a magical world in transformation. The war had begun, not just against Voldemort and his Death Eaters, but against centuries of prejudice and oppression that had made his rise possible. It would be neither quick nor easy. But Harry Potter, the boy who lived, raised by free elves to champion liberation, was prepared to fight on all fronts necessary, magical, political, and social, to ensure that the future of their world would be determined not by blood status or species, but by the content of character and the choices each being made freely. In the struggle ahead, that freedom, to choose one's own path, forge one's own identity, and stand for one's own principles, would prove the most powerful magic of all. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.